new
Dude,
world.
it's so hard for me not to air guitar when this is playing, dude.
Go for it.
You air guitar like a man that's never played a real guitar.
Absolutely, man. I'm not even left-handed. I'm doing this backwards.
I only kind of recently in my life realized that I don't even know how like the octaves on the guitar work. I've been air guitaring the wrong way my entire life. And they like pointed that out to me, and I was like, "Oh, well, I don't really know anything about music." You know?
You gotta hit those
Kinda
high
hard
notes
to
way up
force.
here, right?
The high notes are lower down, right? It's actually shorter.
They're closer. To, yeah.
Yes, me and Kiefer have this conversation for a full minute. Oh, Matt laughs at us and goes, "Hey, as our local expert of the only one who's ever produced anything musical, how does guitar work?"
You guys are doing great. Kiefer, your air guitar is solid. Don't ever change. Don't ever let anyone make you feel bad about who you are.
Oh, absolutely, man. I've been through the fire and the flames with the whole Air Betsy here, and I'm never retiring her.
Air Betsy. All right, so here we are in the new year, 2025. We're going to talk about some exciting stuff today. Specifically, I think a lot of this conversation is going to go around making Greenland great again, MGGA or MIGA, as I like to call it. We're going to take a great effort to. You're laughing over the intro. I'm very excited to talk about it for one today. We actually had like a little bit of incongruency here, so we had to bring Kiefer in, of course. So we have today, I guess I should intro that as well. You got Logan Carpenter, Matthew Billingsley, and of course, Flirt Cheap, Kiefer himself here with us today as well to weigh in and maybe be the tiebreaker. As Matthew and I were kind of reading separate tea leaves when it came to this occasion. I think that the desire to bring Canada and Greenland in as the next couple states in America and rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America might be an indication of just kind of everything that Trump has always been about in his own egotistical stretches, and a strong indication that he's not learned these lessons that all these neocon new right guys like Matthew and Jamie have seemed to vaunt in the past. I don't want to shit on Keith.
How did Flirt avoid that? I mean, he's like
because I made him the moderator of this argument we're about to have, and I don't want to lose brownie points before I start making my case.
That's how he did. Like he's like if there's
I love it, Logan. Bury that nose as deep in as you want. It's not going to help.
Yeah, I was about to say his name. I started realizing I just made him the deciding vote up front of this podcast. I don't want to sully my judges before I get in there. I don't want to have a Luigi Mangione situation on my hands here where I can't find fair degree, you know?
Names and addresses, brother. Names and addresses.
As I alluded to here just briefly, Matthew seems to have a different view on that. We haven't really gotten into it, so I'm excited to have that conversation today. We might talk about some wildfires out in California and like the implications of the externalities of the state's interference within natural processes of fires, of kind of what you sign up for and what you get when you pull funding away from the state, all those situations. And if this is kind of like a state-founded issue that they're having with all these fires, or if this is just kind of the classic Sodom and Gomorrah thing and they just had too much butt sex in California. To lessen the population in God's eyes. We'll might get into that. And if we have time, I think we might even go over Zuckerberg's new direction with Facebook. But we had a lot of fun last week fucking around, doing our little would you rather questions here and there to kind of break up the monotony, and we seem to like that format. So I've have these philosophical brain teasers, as I'd like to rebrand them, instead of just doing would you rathers, as I can expand out a bit. And I think we should open up with one of these today for you gentlemen, a little non-political question. So I just recently had somebody bring up that it is still technically in the state of Texas, you can get a DWI for riding drunk on a horse. And this does apply to several states where you can get a DWI riding a horse. Now, I thought that was a strange thing because one of the early, and I couldn't find the quote anywhere to figure out who to attribute it to, but I know one of the early criticisms of the automobile was, what are you supposed to do when you get drunk? You got to drive this piece of machinery home like you're going to kill people. Whereas you can get drunk and your horse knows where the barn is. He's going to go back to feed at some point. So your horse is actually a safer alternative for a drunk driver. Now, with that being said, that it is still in the books in Texas that you can get a DWI for operating a horse while intoxicated. in the same ilk of this question of if your horse is the one taking you home, can you still get a DWI while operating your horse if you're not actually operating the horse? If you don't have a hold of the reins and the horse is doing the walking, do you breathalyze the horse at that point?
Like asking if you're sitting in the passenger seat, like when the cop rolls up, do you still get the ticket?
See, I thought that was going to go in the direction of like AI and self-driving cars. Do you still get the DWI? I didn't know that we were going to start
That's another
breathalyzing the
question,
horse.
actually. I like the spinoff. No, that was a throwaway line, but legitimately, if you approach a man as a police officer in the state of Texas and he's very clearly intoxicated and you wish to give him a ticket for DWI, but he doesn't even have his hands on the reins of the horse, is he operating a vehicle while drunk, or is the vehicle operating independently at that point?
Well, I guess you'd have to wonder about like what sort of situation could you end up on top of a horse where you're not operating it. So let's pretend you don't know how to ride a horse and you've just gotten beaten up by a bad guy and he throws you on top of a horse and the horse starts walking and you're like, I don't know how to operate this thing. What do I do? And the horse walks into town. Are you responsible? Maybe
the horse walks in front of a Trump hotel and explodes. They said you were shot in your head beforehand, but we're kind of skeptical about that based on a couple internet videos.
So a horse walks in front of the Trump Tower.
That's actually an interesting precedent, though, with the self-driving car. I didn't do a follow-up Google on that, but I wonder what the legality is of getting a DWI in a self-driving vehicle.
You're still 100% responsible right now because the whole thing is they don't let you goof off. So if you let go of the wheel for too long, the car starts beeping at you and harassing you. If your eyes aren't looking at the road for too long, eventually the full self-driving like turns off and the car just like veers straight into whatever like barrier is in the highway. Like it's awful. I wanted the whole like Homer Simpson thing where he gets in the car, he's like, cruise control, take me home, and then passes out drunk. That's what we wanted. That's what we were promised. That's what the future was supposed to be when I watched the Jetsons. But instead we've got this like weird nanny state where your Toyota Corolla needs an update every 15 minutes and it beeps at you if your seatbelt isn't clicked the whole way. It's awful. Totally awful, man. I don't think we'll ever be free to be drunk in cars without watching our backs.
I really hope so, though. That's the future of self-driving cars that I want, because right now we're in this horrible like middle ground. And I will say, I got to sit in the driver's seat of a Cybertruck a couple of weeks ago, and the self-driving feature of it is pretty dope. I got to give them credit for that. It navigated through city streets and it was pretty sweet. However, I want the self-driving car to like completely like redo the interior. Like it should just be couches all around. There should be a mini bar and a stripper
like
pole in the middle
conversation pit.
Absolutely.
Yes,
that's what self-driving cars should be. Like there should be nothing but debauchery as we like go on a ski trip.
And no one cars becoming more like oval floor plans as they become conversation pits. There's big hockey pucks going down the road.
Absolutely.
You should be able to live in your car and it not feel weird. Like just your car drives and does its own thing. And then, you just get out when you want to, you go around. Like imagine all the space we would save if you could just have like a Chrysler Sebring van, for instance. But instead, there's no apparatus, no steering wheel, no nothing. You got like a bed, chair, a toilet, and you're golden. Absolutely golden.
Do you imagine the panic within BlackRock's real estate wing when cars become popular living options after they bought up all of America's real estate?
They'll be so sad. I'll shed a tear for them.
I might have 3.
So on a quick Google search, there's a code there with a long number I won't read, but it is interpreted to mean that an intoxicated operator occupying the autonomous vehicle, engaging its autonomous controls, and sending it on trips can be committed with a DWI. Now, I think that's kind of an interesting way to put that, because back to our horse analogy, can you be passively operating an autonomous vehicle when it itself has its own consciousness, I guess, on some level? Because you're not setting no longer setting the how did it put it? Sending trip information and engaging the autonomous controls. If you're passed out on the horse, you're not engaging any autonomous controls.
But if you're not passed out on the horse, you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's two different types of drunk operating of a horse, aren't there?
I think it like if you're actually passed out and like you know what I mean, like slumped over and just by the grace of God you haven't fallen off it, then that might be one thing. But even then, I mean, if you're caught in the front, you know what I mean, you're still going to get a DUI, even if your vehicle's turned off and you're sitting in the front seat trying to sleep it off. They're still going to charge you with a DUI. So I'd imagine the same applies to the horse. We're just not that sophisticated yet. That's all. We're still just barbarians, hardly off the plains of Savannah, the plains in the Savannah, and our ancient ancestors. For all you know, that's how archaic our laws are.
And you got to think about where the horse would get pulled over as well. You know, you're only going to get pulled over if your horse is walking in the street. Like, no matter how civilized you're walking, you're going to get pulled over. If you're passed out and your horse knows how to sneak through people's backyards and go through some of the trails, maybe it finds a green belt back to your house.
Also, like, who has a horse in a city? That's the thing too. That's like this good
officer. My horse is taking me home. He's new to the area. It felt safer to take I-35, so he lost. That's really interesting in Texas, and I don't know the laws in New Mexico, but I went up to Colorado with a buddy back in September, and we went camping for a couple of nights, and on our way back, he's like, hey, there's this brewery out in the middle of this field. I mean, literally, it's like right next to a grain silo, and it's like, why somebody put a brewery there? I had no idea until it was like 5 o'clock, and we're sitting there, and everybody who works in that area, all of the farmers and stuff, start coming in. And there's a couple of people that just rode up on their horses, and then they got off. They got their like growler to go, got back on the horse, and then trotted off. And I was so stoked about that. It's like, let's go. That is like this. That was a reminder that America is still a beautiful country. So this place is like you cannot tame the American spirit. While we're on the subject of drinking, do y'all know the origins of the word hangover?
No idea.
What, when you were drunk, you would hang over like a fence post, or
literally a Victorian England invention, primarily for sailors. But yeah, they would rent out space on a rope where you could just kind of hang your waist on it overnight and slump yourself over and make it to your hangover. Like literally, like instead of if you're too poor to rent a room, you'd hang over next to the bar at the local.
I guess now we know the answer to that old sea shanty. What do you do with a drunken sailor? What do you do with a
Put a rope through his belt loop and let him sleep it off.
Leave him to hangover.
Man, I'm trying to imagine what the economy is like when you're renting a rope. But yeah, no, go for it. Let's hop to the next thing.
That's a fun little nonsense to open it up there. But getting to brass tacks here, talking about making Greenland great again. I was kind of like had my eyes open today as I started like really digging into Greenland. I thought it was the primary attention on this today would be kind of like the silliness of Trump and like how Trump loves to put golden Trump letters on every tower, and how what could possibly say more about the personality of Donald Trump than wanting to purchase some large land to say he's the only president since God knows when to have expanded American territories. God knows when, it just means I don't know off the top of my head.
Hawaii. Pretty sure Hawaii is the last expansion we had in the 50s or whatever. It wasn't that long ago.
Oh, are you talking about like actually like became a state?
Wait, was it a territory before it became a state?
It was a territory before that.
I would think that still counts though, because nobody considers Puerto Rico part of America. Like when you start drawing the American map, nobody,
especially not in a disaster. Certainly not America when there's a disaster.
And it's like in full blackout mode too, and like no one's really even talking about it right now anymore. Like ever since 2017, when like PREPA went bankrupt and Hurricane Maria hit, they've never really fully fixed the grid, and we just kind of stopped caring eventually. It's kind of awful.
Kind of sad.
The utility has just been like switching hands over and over again. Like a new team hops in and they're like, we fixed a little bit, but we give up. And then, they're gone. A new team hops in, fix a little bit, they give up. And like, there's just parts of the island that just, you kind of expect blackouts now, which is very weird for an American territory, in my opinion. I don't think it should be that way, but what do you do, man? It's a collapse.
Start paying that income tax, and we'll start talking about infrastructure, guys.
Actually, probably.
I don't know. It's a weird situation because like the utility out there is like, I don't want to like phrase this the wrong way because I don't know all the facts, but it's very like corrupt and nepotistic, and they just don't do their job. You give them money and it disappears. Like it totally disappears. A couple employers ago, we had a wind farm out there and we were repairing the publicly owned utility lines because they just wouldn't do it. And it was like a very weird experience for me to watch that happen because it's like, we don't even own these lines. Why are we fixing them? Like it didn't make any sense. It's the only place I've ever seen in the world where we did that. And we had, to give you an idea, like we had wind farms in like southeastern Turkey, like near the Syrian border while the bombs were going off. The utilities were still doing their jobs out there, but it was like Puerto Rico. This was like an alien thing.
Thank God wind farms don't care about BO.
Shut the fuck up. Everybody smelled perfectly normal over there, okay?
Normal for haughty, sweaty, hairy people. Desert people.
All right. Anyways, Greenland. So you're saying, Logan, Greenland?
No, I was very like kind of opened my eyes today a little bit on just how big of a geopolitical player Greenland looks like it might be if we continue to see, especially the ice receding up north and allowing a lot of these trade routes to open up. I mean, this obviously was a big military base for us during World War II and the Cold War with Russia and kind of spying on them, and has a lot of already like great infrastructure for Air Force bases. In fact, it already has a lot of Air Force bases from our time there, which I also thought was a hilarious little like part of just why we hate government spending in general. It's like we built all this infrastructure there and then sold it back to Greenland after the war for $1. Essentially, it's just like a good faith thing, but it's like how many billions of dollars get poured into that? Probably millions, but billions once you consider inflation and the way money's moved since then. And then just to kind of abandon it when it's like, oh, we don't have a direct use for it anymore. And now to watch us gearing back up and getting ready to be a major player and fighting for this giant island, it's like a little bit ironic to have been like, you had a foothold in this and we squandered that for nothing a couple generations ago. But no, I was really, more than anything, what struck me was just how big of from the perspective of natural resources, trade routes, military application, and then just the number of players that are actually already interested in attempting to invest in Greenland. It seemed braggadocious and a little bit of one of those Trumpian hyperbolic statements when he talks about how it's essential. This is one of the big issues for my presidency, is to get Greenland as part of America. But much like Trump always does, he might say it in a crude way. He might put it in a silly way where it's like, I'm going to buy Greenland and make it part of America. But deciding where Greenland stands in this future of geopolitics is actually probably going to be a very important issue of the next decade. And Trump's not wrong in that regard.
Yeah, for sure.
Fair.
Yeah,
Matt,
do you want
to take the other side?
Oh, okay. No.
How do you want me to hop in?
Yeah. No. So I'm not taking the other side per se on this one because Greenland is it is strategic. I mean, that's how we got a lot of it's how we got bombers over across the Atlantic in World War II. They'd fly to Greenland first, and they'd fly into England from there. It is strategic, and especially I think as you start to see ice recede, it's just a really important place. Like if you could imagine putting a bunch of sort of missile defenses or even aggressive weapons, it cuts down the travel time on a lot of offensive weapons. It'd be a nice like kind of Iron Dome type thing to have, plus all the resources. And I think one of the things that kind of blows my mind is how has Denmark managed to hold on to Greenland all of this time? It's like that was kind of the thing that's like why haven't why haven't we taken it from them? In World War II, it's just like, this is ours now. It's like, you guys were Nazis, now you're free again, and we will be taking Greenland as concessions, for the blood, sweat, and tears, money, resources of Americans to, give you your country back and free you from
I wonder if that was
dark
like the absolute easiest sell for the Nazis as they were trying to eke into other countries, and like going to Denmark and talking about how blonde-haired, blue-eyed, 6'4" tall guys were perfect. In Denmark, they're like, yeah, actually, we can get with this message.
We're not so bad, yeah.
You guys might be on to something over there.
Yeah, I think Greenland's super interesting too, and something that I heard, I can't remember who put it this way. You either have to take Trump literally or you have to take him seriously. And it's to that vein of, sometimes he says some bombastic things where it's like, do we just take him at literal face value of what he says? And it's ridiculous. But if you take him seriously about what he talks about Greenland or Panama Canal, then it changes kind of the framework and how you view it. So I think it's really interesting. There's not that many unclaimed, contested places in the world right now. You've got a couple of, you've got the South China Sea and the 9-dash line. You've got some border skirmishes here. You've got some civil, but for the most part, there's not a lot of like huge open room to maneuver, right? There's not like a massive chunk on the chessboard, and Greenland is that. And so
it's interesting.
I think
World
it's
War
interesting.
III is going to be potentially Greenland, Israel, and Taiwan. Like those might be the hot spots that kind of kick us off into the next big catastrophe as human history.
It's like, do you want to die in a tropical hellhole, a desert, or an Arctic hellhole? It's like, which hellhole would you like to go fight and die in?
Oh, there's a pretty good would you rather right there. What would be your pick? Would you rather go risk what do they call it, trench foot, when you get mold?
I'm going to Greenland.
Going in your foot, or you want to really? You're into the. Yep. I mean, you do live in the mountains, I suppose.
Well, no, but not even that. It's like, if you hear accounts of, like, any like histories, like soldier histories of World War II and slogging through Borneo and all of the, it's like the jungle is way more likely to kill you than the enemy is. And
the Russian defense of the past might disagree with you on that.
You're not going to be jungled up though in Taiwan.
The Serbia. Sorry, go ahead.
Said you're not going to be jungled up in Taiwan though. Taiwan is mostly like one big city and a gigantic mountain range. That's really
it's going to be like modern warfare.
National park. Sorry.
Okay, fair enough.
It's quite pretty, beautiful, and you got beaches, and then you got to cross that little Strait of Taiwan, and you've got Chinese
other Taiwan. Do you have big Taiwan?
It's not jungle anymore. It would be full on urban warfare, which would also be hell. I'd pick Israel personally. I think I'd want to be in the desert. Give me that visibility, the sightlines.
Thought maybe you'd see too many trap accounts.
Yeah, exactly. We got some Khazar milkers out there, the big mommy IDF. Come on, man. Come on.
All right.
There are no girls in Greenland, man.
Dude, sold. Going to Israel. I would love, yes, I'm willing to die for our Jewish overlords.
Plus, if shit really goes bad and like Russia and China get the better of you, Matthew for sure, but Kiefer, you're pretty close to that range too. You can just kind of grow the beard out, put a towel on your head, swap sides, and you're good.
This is as much as my facial hair will ever grow out, man. So unfortunately, I am never going to fit in there.
Not everyone can grow beards. That's a stereotype. All right. Just like not every black person's going to try to steal your PS5. Okay. Like, come on. We're civilized here.
Look, I just haven't found the right mix of like minoxidil, horsehair, and testosterone supplements to get the rest of this grow out. I'll figure it out by the time I'm fucking 48, I think, at this point. And then I'll
just in time for the cancer to set in.
I could. I've thought about it because it's cheap, but I've also seen a decent bit of like, wow, my hair transplant failed and now my scalp won't stop bleeding videos. So I'm not entirely sure if I want to go to Turkey to do it, Like, I might just bite the bullet and do it here because they just made it so that like now medical debt doesn't go on your credit in the entire US. So like last time we talked about it, it was just Texas and a handful of other states. So now I could just show up in bad faith and, say like, well, I want to get a hair transplant. I'll pay the deposit. I'll show up. I'll pretend I'm a good customer and just don't pay the rest.
do the free medical hack where you show up to the ER without any documents. You don't bring your ID with you, and you go, I need an emergency hair plant stat, or I'm gonna die. You need you.
Absolutely, man. The forbidden hack. We're gonna watch that entire industry like just burn before our eyes. Not that it already isn't, but it's gonna get so much worse.
Ironically, if you get any of that hair growth stuff in your eyes, it will burn in your eye. It's quite spicy stuff.
Yeah, and with my luck, I'll end up growing hair in my eye. It'll be the only place it grows.
When I do miss my my chemical war against my receding hairline, every once in a while it gets somewhere where it doesn't, and you get like a little itch, and you're like, man, hope that doesn't grow hair tomorrow. It's gonna be weird to have hair there.
I feel you, man. But if we
I
get
had
back
to
to
run
the
down my
topic,
sideburns the other day, and I was scratching like a dog the entire day. I couldn't stop scratching my jowls.
I'm sure that's healthy. I'm sure there's,
Itchy.
I'm
So
sure there's
itchy with
no
regrowth.
adverse side effects whatsoever of that. I'm sure.
I'm extremely
I'm
jealous.
sure
man.
just like Ozempic, Ozempic's definitely not a problem down the road.
I mean, yeah, there's a couple of side effects to this kind of stuff, but you also get like a little bit of a cigarette high when you get that vertigo from your heart palpitations spiking. So that's interesting. At the very least.
That's how you know the medicine's working, man.
That's how you know I'm going to be cute again. 5 more years. If
You
my
can
heart
really
can hold out.
feel the blood vessels dilating, man.
All right, fair enough. All right, what's your take, Flirt?
All right. Well, look, boys, Manifest Destiny is back on the menu. All right. This is probably one of the most exciting times to be an American or be like really a citizen of any country. Like the borders are expanding. And obviously, I think we have to take Trump both literally and seriously here. Obviously, no, we're not taking Canada. Canada would blow.
We don't want Canada.
Yeah, nobody wants Canada to join. It's 30 million mouths. It's a whole other California. That's a
I
lot of
was going
social
to suggest,
services.
what if we left Canada intact, but we just drew that line right where their population that's exactly on the border ends, and we take the northern part of Canada as
So
Eastern
we just like
Alaska,
Julius
you know?
Caesar him. We like trap him in between two sieges.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
the
why
there you
not?
go.
We can encircle them.
Fair
But
enough.
like this is why Greenland is so great. Did you guys happen to look up how many people live in Greenland? I know it off the top of my head because of a call I had literally 6 hours ago.
It's got to
but,
be less than 2 million people. It's got to be less than 1 million. It's gonna be.
You are so far off. It's funny.
It's gonna be. Hold up. There is 97,000 people in Greenland.
Okay, Logan, what do you think?
I'm saying you're looking at 250,000.
There are 56,000 people in Greenland. All right.
Oh shit!
And this place is full of diamonds, it's full of oil, it's full of natural gas. It extends the exclusive economic opportunity zone in the ocean by several thousands of nautical square miles. That's also full of gas, fish.
Is it even a
whales.
genocide if it's only 50,000? Can you just
No,
like
that's the beautiful thing. We don't have to genocide them. We could
Just
give them
scroll.
each $500,000, each $1 million, and it would cost less than
Hey.
like 6 months of Afghanistan. Like,
Well,
I
when
mean,
you put it that way.
now we're talking?
yeah. I mean,
Manifest, it's back on the menu. I love this take. Let's go. Keep going.
but Greenland's perfect. The rest of them, Canada's awful. It's a lot of
We don't
people,
want Canada.
not a lot of benefit for it. Shitty ports, and also the thing with Greenland too that Logan you were hinting at there was the strategic importance. Beyond just the Air Force Base and the Space Force Base. Some people don't know we have a Space Force Base in Greenland, but also it blocks a good chunk of Russia's access to warm water ocean from their northern ports. As the ice melts, if we were to get Greenland, the only real passage that Russia would have is like this narrow strip between Iceland and the UK. That's still international waters. Other than that, they would be more or less contained from their northern ports if we were to look at them as like a future adversary. I would hope that that's not actually going to be the future, and I hope that they're perfectly fine for them to transport through our waters around Greenland. But if that doesn't happen in the future, it's definitely got a lot of strategic importance. And even if it were to become a
You mean
state-
Trumpland?
Trumpland.
Yeah,
this
well,
is the exact
Donald
fucking
Isle.
energy we need.
I'm
This
down.
is-
I'm in.
And the best part was when you had that press conference, I think yesterday, and someone's like, "Can you rule out using military or economic force?" And
No.
he just said no.
It's just,
you know.
I love that answer. No.
Like this
He's
is
not wrong
the
though. I mean, that
greatest-
was kind of what I was trying to get at earlier too, though, like he says it in his Trumpy way, where it's like I'm gonna buy Greenland and make it part of America, but he doesn't touch any of the nuance. But the nuance of it is, you absolutely cannot let this be controlled by China from a military perspective. You absolutely cannot allow this to be controlled by Russia.
And the fact
So in
that
a way,
Denmark
like,
still owns
yeah,
it
we
is
do
actually an
kinda have to
affront.
make it.
So
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to the Panama Canal, one of the reasons we say no, obviously, to that question is because Trump is a great negotiator, and it's a nice reminder that he's not just going to take leverage off the table for free. I'm sure, we sit down and talk with whoever, and we promise not to use military force in exchange for something, maybe or maybe not. Who knows? I don't care. But it's just nice seeing that, like, we're taking the strong foot first in this negotiation, however it turns out. And realistically, obviously, we're not getting Canada. I think chances that we get the Panama Canal back are low, but I think the chances that we get some concessions there that are favorable towards us are fairly good. And I genuinely do believe that Greenland is on the fucking menu, man. I'm looking forward to that one.
If we did, by some like outward stretch, take Canada, do you think we could flip it back to the French after that? Just get it off our hands right away.
Well, I know that France isn't going to want most of it. You know what I mean? Like, France is only interested in one part of Quebec. I don't know. Like, what are we supposed to do? Sell it back to England? Like, England can't afford it. England has fallen for all intents and purposes. The colonies have overtaken the home island, and that place is a hellhole. So I don't think that they have any sort of. We just don't want Canada. If we're going to take Canada, the only thing that we want is that stretch of the Powder Highway in Calgary over to Vancouver and all of those mountain ranges. That's the only part we want. We want Whistler and Revelstoke, and that's it.
I like having a strict border security right there just at the base of the mountain. No Canadians without a passport. You're not allowed in here.
Look, I'm okay with taking their natural resources. I absolutely am. And, one thing that's nice, too, is, like, getting to talk about, Canada doesn't feel like an ally. You know what I mean? They don't really feel like they're on our side on the global sphere for the most part.
What, they make you nervous just because they put Castro's kid in charge?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. That was it.
Well, there's also, to your point real fast, there's a King of the Hill joke where there's like a Canadian neighbor that does a home swap with Boomhauer, and Hank Hill tries to rally everybody. He goes, listen, guys, America's been taking care of Canada ever since England stopped, and it's one of those it's one of those type of relationships where they're not really allies. They're a burdenous, not even little brother, like a second cousin that you must tolerate. That your mom's like, play nice with them, all right? I know they're a little weird.
Well, the thing that rubs me the wrong way is just like the rhetoric on the global stage. Like, there's a lot of like misplaced paternalism, both from Canada and Europe. Like when you go on vacation there, they don't treat you very well. And like Canadians have this whole thing where it's like, oh yeah, we're so nice and polite, but they're fucking awful, man. Like, they're not really that friendly, and they're kind of snooty towards you as soon as they find out you're an American. Like, it doesn't feel like visiting in like a country that you're allied to, like we should be going and they're like, oh, hey, welcome friends. And much the same way in reverse, like, Canadians visit, we should take them to the gun range, give them some steak, harass them for, Saskatchewan or whatever the fuck you make fun of Canadians for. Like, it should feel like.
What the hell are you American fellas doing out here on our street, slated Newt?
Newt.
It gets kind of rough out here when the sun goes down. I don't know why they're Irish now. I lost it.
Good try.
Trying to be intimidating with a Canadian accent. Turns out I can't do a Canadian accent.
Can't win them all.
But I think a lot of the impulse towards talking about invading Canada or taking them over stems from like the way I think we feel on like the international stage, just from like the way they speak to us, the way that politicians speak about us, about our country, about our government, what we're up to. It's always kind of like we're backwards, we're this, we're that. And like no one really respects the US place as like, 70% of NATO, all of their military funding. We exist as their refinery for all of their oil in Canada because they have refused to build new refineries for like 30 fucking years. Like without us, they don't have a market for any of their oil, and they don't really appreciate it. They don't talk about it like it's a positive thing. You know, they're like, oh, you Americans are wrecking the environment with your refineries. And it's like, you don't have a fucking oil port because you refuse
Your
to
refineries are putting too much carbon into your...
Like, you're literally harassing us for being 40% of your economy right there. Like, come on. Like, it's just...
one that bugs me, too. I wonder if this will get you on. Australia can catch a little bit of flack for this as well. Have you ever seen the thing where they're like, oh, yeah, we actually... No. Or they'll do the thing where they're like, we actually were on the beaches of right next to Normandy. We deployed some of our troops over there. And they're like, yeah, we had 16 troops that we did. And you're like, shut the fuck up then. You didn't do anything to sway World War II when you sent some less than 1,000 soldiers into Europe. Shut up. I just like it feels like stolen valor to me a little bit. Not to diminish the sacrifice those soldiers made, but as a country to kind of do the thing of like tagging on, like, oh yeah, when us and those American blokes showed up to save the Europeans, and you're like, you sent 150 Canadian moose hunters. No, it did nothing to impact the war.
Yeah, and they were still a colony back then too, so it's not even like it was their own choice. It was like Britain said, like, hey, send up your single squadron. We will take your squadron. And like England showed up with a boat and picked them up. It wasn't even like Australia came over. Very little activity there. But I don't want to be too mean to Australia right now, because like in this sense, I feel like they're just not included in this conversation. But I am curious about some of the other aspects of Manifest Destiny. Are there places maybe that you can think of that haven't been part of the discussion that you would like to see annexed by America? And this is much better than the military-industrial complex thing where we just invade, spend a bunch of money, build a pipeline, and disappear. Like, I want to actually own a new place. Where would you take if you could?
Well, I've always said, if we truly were if you buy the neocon world police, if we don't take our responsibility on the world stage, then worse actors will. Then you shouldn't have to look halfway across the world to figure out where you should start with the terrorist groups. Like, you should be in Mexico cleaning up the cartel. Like, there is a criminal organization that runs the entire country. It is a massively resource rich, population rich, and by almost every projection I've seen, going to be one of the economic powerhouses of the next century moving forward. And it's held by a bunch of, non-corporated drug cartels. Like, it feels to me like something America could sweep up relatively quickly. There's going to be some ugly shit at the border for sure, because there's well-armed cartel and they're pretty fucking brutal. So you're going to have an ugly war there. But like, I don't know. I always thought that, just as a strictly no morality into it, just thinking about pragmatism. It's like, why wouldn't you fix Mexico to give yourself, one, it fixes your immigration problem too. Because if you just take all of Mexico and turn it into a new prosperous state that functions on the first world scale, all of a sudden, all of your immigration comes from South America into Mexico. And why would they go any farther north than that if they're in a place where they're more comfortable and everybody speaks the same language they speak? You absorb all those resources. You take care of a bad terrorist, somebody you could categorize as a terrorist organization and all the cartels. And you go all the way down to that nice, Panama border and just take that canal back while you're at it.
Have you ever seen the proposed United States under James Polk? Have you guys ever seen this?
I think I have.
No,
and this is we're talking about Manifest Destiny here. Let me pull it up. I've got it ready. This is, to Logan's point, this is a great America. Let's see. Let me add it. Oh shit. Add the stick. Yeah. Think of how good the world would be if in 1850, this is what America actually had. Look at all of the gorgeous beaches. Dude, we've got all of the best parts of Mexico. We drew a line right through that inhospitable horror. You know what I mean? There's a desert and a mountain range that's now the natural border. We definitely took Cancun. We took all of the best parts of Mexico. We got Cuba. We don't have to worry about Castro and communists and Soviets. Now America's got like a real, and why we're at it, we don't want Haiti and the Dominican Republic, but if we are in this vein of annexing, we should take all of the gorgeous tropical islands. All the way down to what's the one right off of Venezuela? Is it Curacao? Whatever that.
Trinidad and Tobago.
We want all of them. We want all of the gorgeous little islands. If we're out there, that's what my manifest destiny looks like. I don't need territories overseas, but if all of these amazing little islands are part of America, it's a much better future.
I'm 100% with it. And also, boys, do you feel the energy in the chat just from Donald Trump talking about buying some shit? Don't you feel like a little bigger? You feel a little better? Don't you feel a little bit more proud to be an American?
Chest swelling, balls dropping.
We're back. We're back. And that is one thing that I am pumped about. It's like I'm stoked to feel, and I don't know if like it'll actually be good or not, but it's nice to feel good about thinking about what it feels to be an American versus like this whole time under Biden. I mean, you get Sleepy Joe and but it's so boring. Oh, Americans are bad. Slavery it's their original sin. And oh, we were so mean to the natives. Who cares? You guys lost. Get over it. Like, it feels good that, I don't know. It feels good that we don't care anymore.
2025 in history books, Donald Trump adds Greenland to the Union as a pro-slave state. Gonna start balancing the scales again, y'all. It's got a little bit. We're gonna bring it back to the median.
I was going to talk about foreign policy, but honestly, the last 30 years of government spending, I think most people would struggle to find a single thing they could point to where they're like, yeah, I like this. Buying Greenland, I think, is like the first like win of spending that I've really ever seen. Otherwise, like, my only impetus with government is to cut spending. I don't want any more. I've never seen anything out of them that I like or I'm interested in. And if we bought a country that's full of oil and diamonds and only has 50,000 people in it, I don't even know what price we could pay where I'd be like, whoa, that's too much. Like, however much it's going to cost. What is it? Like, if you look up the GDP of Greenland, it's like
consider
$3 billion.
the military applications as well. I mean, if this becomes a major player in potentially what could be the next world war, what's the price you're putting on that? How much?
Yeah, it's priceless. It's priceless.
Especially with government spending and deficits. You know what I mean? We'll just print the money, raise the deficit, and go on about our day.
Well,
and
I mean, I even thought this is one that's that's a good point too. What the fuck do you care? Just print it. You've been printing it anyway.
We got $34 trillion. Like, even if they wanted $3 trillion, what's 37? Oh my goodness! Now our debt's out of control. Now that we're at $37 trillion, whoa, we're never going to get out of this hole.
I was reading about this to like add to the angst of it. I mean, China's been kind of doing the Africa program there. They've already been trying to buy infrastructure. We've done a good job of like pressuring Denmark to squash any deals with them, so they haven't been going into it too much. But they're clearly showing that interest. They've had open conversations about the quote Arctic Silk Road they want to create with Russia. So they're clearly already having conversations about it. What was the other thing? Oh, they see this as potentially a major threat to their near monopoly on semiconductor production, because this is an area that's potentially rich in all of those same rare earth metals that you need for that. So, like, I mean, that right there is enough information to say, like, this is going to be a fight to take it from China, despite them being nowhere near it and not really having any legitimate claim. There are people that want their fingers on this, and it's something that's clearly beneficial. There's a lot to be gained from taking this land, it seems like.
I suspect it will cost less than Elon paid for Twitter. Like, if we end up buying it, I really think it will.
Well, Twitter does have a much larger population.
It does. But like, from a valuation standpoint, like, the GDP of Greenland is like a little over $3 billion. If you were to guess how much Denmark is able to tax out of that, maybe they're able to take 10% of that a year, maybe more, maybe less. I don't know. But, how much are they really making out of it? They're probably making like $300 million at the most. If you were to value it at like a 33x multiple, you're barely scratching like 20 billion. And that's paying Denmark for 40 years of taxes into the future. We could pay them for 100 years of taxes. It'd be less than we spend on the Department of Education.
That's an interesting question. If you are that type of wealthy, if you're Elon Musk and you can either buy Twitter or you could buy all of Greenland, what do you think your your take
Well,
on that would be to
Twitter
purchase
helps you. Twitter helps you become, get dubbed President Musk by a lot of people that hate you. It's
to be
like
fair, a lot of people think
Twitter
you
is a
bought
lot
America.
more influential than Greenland, to be fair, in the short term. However, I will say, I just have to. It's like Elon. I've always thought he's a super villain. I'm glad that he's an American. However, he posited something the other day that just made me absolutely furious, and I don't like him right now. His father was talking about how Elon has always loved Liverpool because they have a nice. Their family comes from there, and he's like talking about buying the soccer club potentially, and I just do not want to see him own Liverpool. I love Liverpool, and I don't want to fall into his hands.
Look, you got to deal with it, man. Americans are buying up British soccer teams. Didn't JJ Watt and his wife buy up like a British soccer team recently?
Yeah, but not my soccer team. Dude, all day, not in my backyard. I'm a NIMBY till the day I die.
Get ready for those Liverpool unis to have a big Tesla T on the back of them.
He's probably going to give it some fucking dumbass name too. Like if there's one thing Elon is bad at, it's naming things.
If he changes it to like Liverpool X, I hope.
Surely,
I hope the
surely that's one of those that's been around long enough. You can't take the Hotspurs away from him. That's been around for so long.
Dude, that's Tottenham. What are you talking about? That's like
excuse me, you're right.
It's the Red Devils.
The Red Devils. Whatever it is. I don't watch soccer. I'm a heterosexual American
man. Whatever. Not even gonna.
No, Elon's definitely gonna rename it. He's gonna rename it something so fucking dumb. He'll take some like character from World of Warcraft and name it after it or whatever. He'll change the logo too. Like I
stick to the Red Devils and just do a little Martian man. Little guy on Mars is the logo.
All right, that's.
I don't think that's enough for him.
Horrible, but
he's gonna rename it when he buys it, dude. Like he's just. I've never seen him buy anything and keep the name or even give it like a good name. Like none of his cars have good names.
Could they be the Liverpool Musketeers?
I hate it in its essence.
A little Frenchy for an English soccer team. Got to imagine the people that live on the streets of Liverpool.
It plays well on the ego. I mean, anyways, I don't want to. I'm not trying to side rail the conversation with Elon buying Liverpool, but that's just one of those things I saw the other day, and it made me. It's one of the. I got irrationally angry at seeing that post. It's like, why is it hot in here? It's like. It's just like this stupid is I was just like I'm irrationally angry over something I just saw on the internet. I shouldn't get this worked up.
All right, so I think next we want to get into I think that this is a reflection of more of what we've seen out of Trump, and I know Matt had a contrarian view to that. Do y'all want to do another little brain teaser before we get serious again with our next section though?
Why not?
So I heard this question posed the other day. A lot of during the feudal systems, kings had official tasters, right, to make sure their food was not poisonous. How many of those food testers during medieval times do you think ended up being killed by the state because a king had a food allergy that was unbeknownst to them?
Oh, interesting. So
like some tester tries out the board, says perfectly fine, and then
they die because they're allergic to something that's in the food, and now
they're like, oh, not only dies, but dies of anaphylactic shock in a very obvious way, grasping at their throat and gasping for air. That the food definitely took you out.
Well, my guess is that as inbreeding got more prevalent and the Habsburg chin becomes like a real thing, it's a non-zero number. My guess is it's probably like 7 throughout, from like, let's call it 900 to 1500. I bet there's at least 7. No more than 20, but no less than 7 is my guess.
That's a good point. You got to think about the time scale because, like, how far back are you going? Like, how long was an official food tester even prevalent in royal families? But I do think that's an interesting, in a time when before germ theory existed, they certainly didn't understand food allergies. You could probably definitely see, especially at that level of wealth too. These are probably the only people that are importing any kind of exotic foods.
And the only time when they would be importing like dishes would be like during some sort of diplomatic event, right? Otherwise, it'd be prepared food.
Raise eyebrows further.
So, yeah, I mean, when you're having like some sort of new cooked dish, like that would be when it would happen. And like, would people be wondering, like, ooh, is this a conspiracy between the food taster and the Shah of the Seljuk Turks? I mean,
treacherous.
how many people actually died from like food poisoning?
Palatable dishes.
Hold up, I didn't hear either of you guys.
Oh, you can go first, Logan. I got something to Google.
I was just saying the dirty Persians killed our king with their disgusting ethnic dishes.
Their curry fury.
The king's diarrhea.
Yeah, I do wonder though, like back then, like was food poisoning like an actual method of assassination? Or is it something that's kind of newer?
Because it definitely goes back a long time, because I remember the story of, I believe, Mithridates, who was a Thracian king who was obsessed with the idea of Rome trying to poison him.
Oh, yep.
And so he took poison every day of his life to build an immunity up, which ironically, when he was captured by the Romans, he was then sentenced to death by poison, and he lived for so long, no matter how much poison they poured down his mouth.
Oh, so I actually, this is really interesting because I remember the story differently. It's that when he was actually about to be conquered, he tried to kill himself via the poison, and he had the immunity, so he didn't die, and the Romans caught him, and they finally just beheaded him. That's my remember.
Sodomized him to death, and
who knows?
I think you're right. Now that as I was saying that, I think I mixed two very similar stories up. One was snakes in a pit. The other was poisoning oneself.
No, it's interesting. I mean, I looked too while y'all were talking, and apparently the reason he was so afraid of being poisoned was because his dad was poisoned with food. So yeah, I guess it is a thing people were doing back then.
I mean, that was 2,500 years ago.
Right. Yeah. So that's some ways back.
120 BC.
So
very interesting.
2,200 years ago, 2,100 years ago.
Grinding up them cherry pits and killing a couple kings back then.
Can you imagine like the assassin though, who's like, wait, peanuts are poisonous? And then like tries to make like poison peanut dishes for years on end, never able to recreate.
No, just wait till a bunch of like white American housewives get a hold of the internet, and then like peanut allergies are just gonna like it'll just be a thing. It'll just be a thing because they're so scared of peanut allergies.
I heard once, and I don't know exactly how much truth there is to this, but it was a story about the origin of assassins. It was I think the original word was Hassasins with an H because it's Arabic, and it was some Arabic king that allegedly would take street urchin children or homeless people or whatever, drug them to the point where they had no idea what was going on, take them to an interior palace paradise, like an enclosed garden, and tell them when they came back to it that they had died and gone to paradise, and they got to eat whatever they wanted to, and they got to fuck all of the hot slave chicks they wanted to. And they had to hang out in heaven with God. And then one day the God figure would approach him and say, hey, you're going to be sent back to earth to fulfill a special mission for God. You're going to go kill this guy. And then don't worry about what happens after that. You'll return to heaven. And they would drug him again, drop him back off on the street where they had found him originally with this new mission to go assassinate somebody. And then with just no intention of following up. It's just like they're on God's mission now. They go, whatever, go die after you try to complete this assassination.
It's pretty smart. I mean,
it's an interesting way to get assassins.
It's actually a great way to try, you know what I mean?
I think there was a fair amount of training that exists there as well that I left out.
Pretty nice.
Sorry, Keith.
Said coming up with that before the internet was invented would be pretty fucking impressive, you know? Like it's a nice little like narrative story, and for someone to like, oh no, this will get them, and for it to actually work, yeah, it's top shelf, man.
I hope it's true because it's such a cool story. I think it's pretty ambiguous on the historical facts.
As most things
might be a creation of the internet, to be fair, but it is a fun story nonetheless.
As most things are. It's like Dan Carlin says, even if ancient history isn't true, we have to believe it.
Yeah, fair enough. We do.
There's some truth in there. It's got to be. All right, we didn't do 25 minutes on that brain teaser. Like I thought
So we'd really dive into the food taster angle, huh?
So I as I had alluded to already, I kind of saw this ostensibly all this talk of the Gulf of America and Canada and Greenland being annexed in. Like, to me, this feels a lot, and I've come around to the Greenland argument, but especially the Gulf of America and the Canada talk. Like, this to me feels a lot like the old Donald Trump. That this is a love for self-promotion. That he would absolutely love to be able to say he expanded American lands within his presidency. Like, what more could you say about being a modern, successful president than buying an entire new island, the largest island in the world, nonetheless? And especially if it does become this economic boon in the next century of being like, hey, you remember how everything got fixed because I bought that island for you guys? But I don't know. I guess it, to me, just feels like another indication of an argument against Trump having learned all of these valuable lessons, and that we're going to have a better presidency this time, because it still feels like Trump the self-promoter to me.
Okay.
With no nuance to it. So I'm curious to hear your
I agree that so let's take it from the premise of like, what do you consider like normal behavior, right? Like, Trump's outside of that realm. And like the Overton window shifts with that. So now we have to look at what is erratic or normal behavior in terms of Donald Trump. He's always bombastic. He's always been a huge self-promoter, and that's not going to change. And no amount of corralling, no amount of, you know what I mean? An assassination attempts, like, nothing is going to change Donald Trump. He is going to be unapologetically him. However, I do think he's learned all of the right lessons in terms of, and this isn't whether like, it doesn't, if you want Donald Trump to do good or not, or if you are pro Donald Trump or not, that's a different conversation. When I say the right lessons, it's like, how do you command your presidency, and how do you make sure that you are the most effective person that you can be in that office? Now, whether you agree with those, what he does or not, that's a completely different conversation. But I think he has learned lessons, because Donald Trump is not in the media for these weird follies, these off the cuff, like, where did that come from? The Comfefe, none of that stuff. Like, it's very organized, and it's very precise. Like, you have David Sanger from the New York Times who asked him that question. It's not, you know what I mean? There's something very clear and concise about it. And I think that his first term, like, he did learn, like, his team is ready to go. And this is something that, and there's a couple of different sources I'm getting a lot of this information from, but I think a lot of people underestimate how quickly Trump is going to move in his first 100 days, right? He's not depending on a bunch of people, that he's not an outsider anymore. And he's not trusting kind of the institution that he said he's there to drain with their recommendations. Like, he's got a fresh team that's ready to go, that's vetted to his standards, maybe not to, you know, the American people's standards, but to his standards. He has a loyal team that's ready to enact his agenda. And he is in the news very deliberately. And that's where I think that he has learned. And I think that Susie Wiles, I know that we talk in like our grade Donald Trump's cabinet report card, I gave her an A+. And I think that this has a lot to do with her. She is a bulldog behind the scenes. And as much as you can make Donald Trump tame and stick to the message, she's doing a great job. And so I don't see this as like, exactly, I don't see this as like Donald Trump, like, it's chaos. It's chaos because he is chaos, but it's a different type of chaos. Think of the chaos the first time around. Why was he in the media? Why are we hearing about it? It's not a very strategic.
Your wife's a dog.
Exactly. Even like, take the debate when he talked, like, they're eating the pets. That is unhinged Trump. You know what I mean? That's Trump out of bounds. We're not getting that. It's very deliberate. It's very concise. And I think he actually has learned from his first term, because he's in the media very specific and pointed items and agendas, not just like Trump is blundering and here's a firestorm. Does that make sense?
I wonder if that's not the highlight of the Kamala Harris political career at this point, is the one halfway decent debate. And it really wasn't even her being that strong. It was just Trump falling apart. It's like her shining moment to point back to for generations. I guess I'm wording myself incorrectly here when I'm saying that Trump hasn't learned any lessons, because he has learned some lessons. I guess what I'm concerned with is that he has learned the wrong lessons when it comes to things like Rubio being at the top of his head of the state again. I think that he definitely has a better team than he had last time, but I think that quite a few of those decent picks he made got pushed out without any kind of real fight out of him, and that he was very happy to put in some more neocons who are pro-Israel and will drag us into war in the Middle East.
Which is totally fair, but I mean, outside of Matt Gaetz, there hasn't been that many retractions, and I think we're actually going to see most of Donald Trump's cabinet get appointed. I just, and this isn't me, like, I'm rooting for Donald Trump in the sense, like, I want every president to do good because I want this country to be an amazing country. So I'm rooting for him unequivocally to be a good president, not because I love Donald Trump, just because I want every American president to be great. But I do think that he learned I think he learned more lessons than people want to give him credit for. And he is just so Donald Trump that it kind of it taints the narrative and how we look at him. It's like I think like he's so much more contained, and I don't think that people give him enough credit for how contained he actually is. Because think about like, and I guess we'll see through his first 100 days, but I think that there's going to be a fascinating case study at the end of his 100 days to look at not only his 100 days compared to his first administration, but the 100 days of every president since like Reagan. I think that now, whether you like it or not, I think it's going to be one of the most effective 100 days that we've seen in a long time.
I see what you're saying. I do think that you have to have learned some lessons about the grotesquities of the inner workings of the country once he got in there, and just how many people turned their backs on him and did kind of ignored the president's commands and did what the deep state wanted to do altogether. But I think the lessons that I'm concerned mostly about, that I don't feel like he's absorbed, are the ones where the right are the worst on. The ideas of the neocon right on the Middle East and on even things like, not that it was even the wrong answer to say no, I will not take military action off the table for Greenland, but just the potential for spurring on wars and fighting this neocon fight. And I'm sure Donald Trump's much more concerned with the military applications and concerns of Greenland and blocking out the free trade enterprises of Russia and China and these kind of antagonistic modes, when those are the things that I'm worried about, that he doesn't have any good voices in his ears, that like, who's in the room saying, hey, maybe it's not a good idea to, sure, you might come up as a huge win, even maybe for your entire presidency. Maybe you make it 4 years of just kicking ass and winning every deal. But at some point, we have to hand this down to our kids to run this country. And how many of them did you piss off through economic assassin behavior in all these other countries and all these other, even potentially more long-memoried, what's the word I'm looking for, regimes that run these other countries that aren't up to the whims of democracy, and a lot of opportunities that hold these grudges for generations and generations.
Okay, that's all fair.
Fair. I mean, the answer to that's not, we'll be a pussy and let them take Greenland either. So,
yeah, that's all fair. What are your thoughts, Flirt?
Well, I don't think we can judge him until like his actual presidency starts. But I would say that he hasn't made any wrong moves yet in the time between the election and now. As far as staffing goes with his picks, not bad. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's not the best thing in the world, but there's a lot of good picks in there that I'm fairly happy with. And some of the bad picks are in roles where like the amount of damage they can do can be contained. Like, for instance, you could make an argument that there really is no point to having a Secretary of State. And that for the most part, the president can overstep or sidestep the Secretary of State at any point in time on any issue whenever they choose, because operating in this diplomatic sense and our foreign relations is like one of the primary roles of the president. So, I mean, it's one of those, it's probably the one area where you can most overstep the cabinet position. out of any of the other cabinet positions. So, putting someone like Rubio in there isn't the worst thing in the world. And Rubio hasn't been awful either as far as neocons go.
Little Marco.
Yeah. He's taken the whole thing in stride, and I haven't really seen him step in things. And he stepped up quite a bit on a few bills in the Senate where I've been kind of like, oh, okay, I didn't know Rubio was on our side. And I've found myself saying that a few times, enough that I look at this pick and I don't necessarily feel bad about it. So, for the most part, again, I don't think he stepped in it. And like this whole conversation about Manifest Destiny, again, like I think it's one you have to have. I think the only bad thing that you could have said as a president at this point in time is, no, we're not considering buying Greenland. No, we're not considering buying the Panama Canal. Taking it off the table before you're even in office would be an awful move. And I think that you have to take these options seriously. And obviously you got to jab at fucking Mr. Trudeau up there. I mean, you got him to resign with just a couple comments. Like, come on.
Did he officially resign? I thought the last I'd seen he had kind of suspended.
He resigned as of Monday, right?
Yeah, he resigned, and he will be stepping down once their party picks a new head of the party. And he had to announce it twice, once in English and once again in French. So it's a double resignation.
It shows exactly why we don't want Canada as part of the United States. It's like if you have to give any sort of like official declaration in French to reach a portion of your population, we don't want you. We only speak not even the Queens. Like we speak the bastardized version. We speak American English.
Although I've heard that French is the most comfortable language to give a reconciliation in, to surrender.
That makes sense.
That boyish language.
French have so many metaphors for things. I'm sure they could say "we surrender" without even saying "we surrender." You have taken the cheese off of my meatloaf.
I have lost my will to fight you. My body no longer carries its potent odors. My stamina is going low. I've not sexually assaulted a woman in a fortnight. I am barely a Frenchman anymore.
For my weekly shower.
I always liked Inuits have 8 different words for snow because it's so strongly ingrained in their culture. Whereas the French have no word for consent, which is really interesting. So.
Really?
Enter Pepe Le, like unexpected Pepe Le Pew.
You want to buy Greenland? Maybe we can come up with a little agreement.
This is wild to think about. Like, was Pepe Le Pew just a ethnic stereotype? Like he's a skunk that rapes everyone?
Yeah,
he smells bad and he sexually assaults women.
Yeah, for sure. I thought he was like the personification of the French. That was the whole point.
I don't know if they meant to do this one. It might have been a little before the times, but they made him black too, which is interesting.
He's a skunk. Okay, so there's some white in there.
I don't know if they saw that coming way back when. Because Walt Disney's very subtle. I guess not Walt Disney, if you Looney Tunes. Warner Brothers very subtle hints at the wrongful foreign immigration policies in France.
You see black people too. Our cities are also dangerous, Baltimore.
If you cannot smell your cheese from yesterday and your sweat, it was not smelly enough.
Oh.
Yeah, yes, I smoke a pack of cigarettes a day, but it is just to hide the cheese on my breath.
Oh, yeah, I always thought that, or not always, but at a certain point as an adult watching Looney Tunes is like, oh yeah, he's just like the French, because Tom and Jerry, right? It's what the British and the Germans used to call each other. And so
I never knew that.
Yeah, so that's like Jerry was the British slang for Germans, and Tom was the German slang for British. And so so that's like the cat and mouse game. It's kind of a play on like Germans and British. And when they introduced Pepe Le Pew, it's like, oh, here's the French.
I never thought about any of this.
Surprised the cat's the English one. You would think the guy looking for rats in the walls would be definitely German, right?
You are sheltering enemies of the state under your floorboards, are you not?
Try Glazers.
Oh my goodness. Whew. Oh wow.
What a
Well, should we move to the next topic then?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess we're just wrapping that up. Yeah, for sure. There's no going back to that topic. We're done.
over that. All right, do y'all want to do wildfires in the new Sodom and Gomorrah, or do y'all want to do Zuckerberg's new direction with Meta?
The wildfires are probably pretty topical at the moment. Why
All
not?
right, I'm gonna let
So-
Matt intro the wildfires since I've done. a
Well,
little research
so
on this.
I want to propose. Let's get your early predictions out here, right? Because every time there's a massive wildfire, there's always a conspiracy. And even if it's kind of in the local, right? Like there's the big wildfire here. And there was the conspiracy that, the government only stepped in when the rich neighborhood that I live in compared to all of the poor places that burned before. It's like, only until your community was threatened did the federal government step in. So there's always conspiracy. So what do you think? Let's get on this early. What caused this wildfire? Is it Jewish space lasers? Is it is it Oprah? Like hit me with your conspiracy about why the Palisade fires actually happened, because God knows the grifting is coming, and we're gonna hear there's gonna be 4 days of all of this like unvetted bullshit on the internet about all of these anomalies about this fire, and it's gonna go away, and no one's ever gonna talk about the Palisade fire again. So what's your conspiracy theory?
It's an easy one. We've already been talking about this conspiracy theory. It's been building for a while. We did an episode on this 3 weeks ago. They already caused all this fog, this mysterious fog that hit during winter in the United States, and we never see fog cover the entire planet. It is the aliens. Obviously, the drones in New Jersey are now torching California. They're causing fog to roll over the entire nation, which I don't know did you guys like that one too? At the same time, the whole nation got cold and there was fog. It must be the aliens. And then everybody came up with this mysterious illness that seemed to, match
one of the two. It's either the aliens or DARPA. One of the two.
I'll give you that.
I had to throw my phone away for a little bit reading some of those. Like it's just, my window is not getting wet during fog. It normally gets wet during fog. This must be some dispersed COVID 2.0.
It's because it's Martian fog. We got that dry fog on Mars. Permeates from their alien spaceships.
That shit was painful, man.
Gives
Absolutely
you the 5G
painful.
Must be the space Negro fog.
Honestly, I have no idea what conspiracy theory they're going to come up with for this one. I think it's going to be tough because it hit like the rich neighborhood in the hills over the city, as well as some other poorer areas of the city. So like a lot of people got touched all over the place. I don't know. I don't know how you spin this conspiracy wise, but someone's going to figure it out. They're going to tell us that some Iranian drone was spotted with they figured out Greek fire from like the ruins of some ship they found off the coast.
Greek fire. Dude, I'm not ready for Greek fire.
But I have no idea, man. I have no idea. What
perfect. Fantastic.
Because people focus on all the wrong details. Someone looks and they're like, why did the tree still standing while the house is there? And it's like, well, the house is dry on purpose because we don't like wet houses. And the
trees are
tree
wet
is wet
because they drink water. It's like, have you ever tried to burn wet wood? It doesn't.
It's so weird. You have these conversations that are just almost productive. And then like without fail, every 5 seconds, someone pops up to ask like, the most inane question, and instead of just saying like, I didn't know that, they'll force you to keep answering the question over and over and over again. Like I imagine there's a lot of people who could have very productive conversations about what went wrong, what they can fix, what's going wrong, what's bad, what's good, but instead like
all I'm saying is the burden of proof is on you as to why this wasn't the Atlanteans coming over the ice wall, and until you can provide that evidence, I'm sticking with my
Checkmate, round earther.
All the
You'll see that
Teslas
when
received a fire update at once.
The jihad button.
Did you
Las Vegas was just a test.
dude, I'm gonna have to ask. I'm gonna have to ask the guy who has the Cybertruck if he got his jihad update. Oh,
Where do you light the fireworks in here? You know, there's not a cigarette lighter.
oh man. Well, all right. So we got Greek fire. Logan, what's your? Oh, so we got aliens and Greek fire.
I guess I shouldn't say aliens. It could just be the Russian drones or the Chinese drones, whatever we're blaming the drone activity on.
I'm sticking with Jewish space lasers. I mean, this has been what was the big one up north, in Northern California, caused by PG&E. You know, their faulty power lines, and everyone's like, "Oh, this." It's like Jewish space lasers has been the cause of so many wildfires for the last 10 years, and you know what? So there's nothing friendly about friendly fire. But sometimes, you know, a nice rich Jewish neighborhood in Los Angeles has to burn to get the scent. You know what I mean? Like you got to throw the scent off the trail. And so I'm sticking
That
with
was
Jewish
always
space
my-
lasers. This
my
is that's
absolute
it's definitely coming
favorite.
up.
That was my favorite 9/11 conspiracy theory, is that, you know, on the day of 9/11, not one Jewish employee showed up for work that day in the Trade Center.
That can't be true.
It's not at all.
That's
It's not at all true, but I've heard that. I've heard that several
It's
times
the
throughout the
World
years. It's
Trade Center.
hilarious.
I mean, if anything, it's
Hilarious.
like I would expect at least half of the victims to be Jewish, if I'm being honest.
And if you're a Saudi, what else are you really aiming for, you know?
Oh, yep. So that's what I'm sticking with. I'm sticking with Jewish space lasers. I give it less than 24 hours, and there will be videos on the internet talking about how these burn patterns don't resemble, because, and this is one of the things, it's like I love and I also hate this about the internet, is that we have subject material experts in everything, like every week. And it's, you know, it's like it's the person in the grocery store that you know, like the person that's like checking you out, that lectures you about COVID and virology and all these things. It's like, look, if you're this smart about all of these things, like we need you. Like, what are you doing back? It's like the world needs you front and center, and like you should be probably governor, or, you know, if not governor, president. And so I can't wait to hear all of the people that know literally nothing about forest fires, and or just like the general basics of fire and how it moves through communities. I can't wait to hear all of the theories about.
I really like the
experts.
swap we've seen over 20 years, where it used to be like all of these wildfire every year, California lights up on fire. And even though it's not every year that we've ever been a part of California, it's definitely because of this left-wing conspiracy of climate change and because of the way weather's changing. And every time lightning strikes or somebody didn't put out a campfire, it's because the climate's not so good. And that's why California's on fire. And I'm sure from the left, they were like, why won't they believe our theory? These guys are just so close-minded. And the right's like, actually, I see your theory and I'll raise you Jewish space lasers. You're not as I am.
Climate change, dude, that's beginner. That's the top of the iceberg. What do you know about conspiracy theories?
The climate is changing and it's the Jews' fault.
I didn't know I was talking to rookies.
You want to really have this conversation, or you just want to pussyfoot around me?
How do you think those holes in the ozone layer formed?
Oh my god. There's something, and I will
They're
say
not
it's
actually
like,
holes, they're stars of David in this.
oh my goodness. There's something like the year I spent in California, I showed up in NorCal in like January. It was like January 3rd or 4th, whatever, and it rained. And it rained
Did you
every
say
day.
gay things like NorCal before you went to California, or did that rub off on you while you were there?
You've known me for a long time, Logan. I've always been gay. All right, so I mean, slap the water. Like, do I need to run through all of the gay things that I've, like, all my effeminate mannerisms? I don't. All right, I'm not on trial here. It's already
Well done.
proven I am guilty. Okay. Anyways, so when I showed it rained nonstop from like January to March. And it's like, oh, this is kind of nice. And so everything grows and it's very luscious. And all of a sudden, God turns off the spigot and all of this lush growth, it gets dry. And I was like, oh, all of a sudden, like, I see why California burns every single year, because by June, like all of that lush undergrowth and all of that vegetation, now it's super dry. And
Interesting. It gets real dry right around June. Right around Pride Month, almost like God's a little bit upset with California.
No more rainbows.
Back to my Sodom and Gomorrah theory.
All right, so maybe it is
June 1st hits and God lights that place on fire.
Thou shalt not be gay.
No more sodomy.
So
there's a whole chapter in my book about this.
Fair enough. All right. Well, what are your thoughts on it, Flirt? In all seriousness.
Well, I mean, from the serious aspect, you're definitely right. And during the PGE fires, I definitely remember, because that was when I was working on a project in California. And like one of the big issues is we needed like a very specific run of transmission lines from NorCal to San Francisco. And the upgrade costs were like enormous, because it's like just a gigantic run of power lines where just nobody is in between the space. Like no one lives up there. It's mostly desolate. There's sections of the coastline, like it's called the Lost Coast. Like the Pacific Coast Highway ends. It doesn't keep going. And there's this whole section of the coastline nobody lives on. There's nothing out there. There's a few small towns, but it's almost totally empty. And it's great area to grow like grapes for wine, because
weed.
Yeah, absolutely. They're both things that actually get better when there's less water and less humidity. And so, you know, the grapes must suffer for the wine to taste good. And I'm sure it's the same for weed. I wouldn't know though. But like this is also great fodder for wildfires, because you have a lot of growth that eventually turns into dry brush. And with PGE, the issue is just you have like long runs, you know, 150, 200 miles of power lines where there's nothing, there's no people, and you need people out there to do brush control on like a regular basis, 4 or 5 times a year. And it was just more expensive than PGE could really budget for with what they were doing. And they needed to raise prices and they couldn't. And they unfortunately had issues where, you know, dry brush touches a power line, it sparks, and there's dry brush below, sparks land and fire, and there's no real like fire service anywhere nearby either. So like, you know, how are you even putting that fire out? And I don't think that's what happened in this case, because this is a lot closer to Los Angeles. Like my suspicion is just that this was likely lit by humans in some shape or form. Maybe homeless people, maybe people with heaters, like space heaters outside, wrong time of year. I don't really know. But I suspect this is man-made. And then of course there's the whole issue where, you know, they don't have water in the fire hydrants. And you know, that's a whole other can of worms we can get into in a bit. But like, if you guys want to talk about why or how you think the fires really started, I'll give you all space to do that.
What do you think about a 2 birds, 1 stone type of situation for California with wildfires and their massive homeless problem? If they don't just subsidize 3 meals a day for homeless guys to patrol, like these are your 2 telephone poles, just like hang out here instead of the city. Just go between them and make sure no fires start, and we'll make sure to airdrop you a Subway sandwich 3 times a day.
Man, I wish we lived in that world where you could just approach homeless people and get them to do things.
All I'm saying is that those telephone poles do get fresh needles every week.
Yeah, that would be a great world. I mean, my guess is they're probably going to be man-made. A lot of fires are, and who knows? So you don't need to assume malicious intent. And I think that something it's highlighted here because it's such a rich neighborhood. But I think that a lot of people would actually be very surprised at how inefficient firefighting systems are in general. This is something that when I was like on the governing body of my town that we talked about, that there were, you know, it's like before the community I live in became incorporated, it was just ran by a corporation and they skimped on water. They skimped on the water pipelines. And so there are places where you should have like a 6 or an 8-inch water main, and it's a 2-inch PVC pipe. And you know what I mean? And it's like, well, you can't, it's like, well, if there's a fire in some places, like, well, there's literally, it's like outside of the pumper tenders bringing water in, it's like the fire hydrant's not going to work. Like that's for looks. And so I live in a place where there's certain fire hydrants, like, don't even bother. Like, don't even try. Nothing's coming out of that thing. And I think that it goes to show that there's probably a great underserving of the things that matter most to people, but they just don't think about it, right? Most people think about like, oh, I just turn on my faucet and there's water. Nobody in water infrastructure is really never high on maybe outside of like Flint, Michigan. It's like most people, that's not a priority in what do they care about that their government's spending money on. And because of that, it's easy for governments to skimp on that because nobody ever thinks about it until their faucet doesn't work, until the firefighters can't pull water out of a hydrant. And it's just, you know what I mean? It's not outrageous. And my guess is if there was a way to do a survey of all of the communities in America, I would say that the vast majority of them would come up like critically underserved in their ability to fight fires. And most people they just don't think about it. So when everyone's like, oh, how is California out of water? Because they're right next to, you know what I mean? Like enter bad arguments. Like they live next to the ocean. It's like, yeah, sure. Maybe you could like run a pump into, but you know what I mean? That doesn't help you. Like, oh yeah, let's just create a 4-mile hose line and try to, and have enough pressure.
Ever.
Yeah, exactly. Like, let's just create
6 hours.
Like a 10-mile hose line and have enough pressure to, to be able to fight fire. Like, oh yeah, that's a very reasonable expectation. Yeah, you're right. How dumb of us not to think
maybe
about
we need
this.
to look to it similarly with the origin of this problem being Jewish space lasers. Maybe we need to look to space for our solution. Have you guys ever seen these new pesticide-free weeding apparatus? They're like giant lasers with AI identifying cameras on them.
I've seen some videos.
I've never seen it.
It's these laser powered weeding machines where they go over the crop, and it has an AI camera that distinguishes between crop plants and non-crop plants, and it'll shoot a little laser and just burn out those weeds in the middle. And that way you're not using tons of herbicide all over your crops.
Or illegal labor.
So maybe we just need Elon to get enough satellites up there that can have large, like flat disc, maybe of some sort. That like obviously you can't put enough water up there, I wouldn't think. So maybe you need to have some kind of like, a small fire started, and you just shoot like a little dampening bag of flour down to the planet. Asteroid of flour to snuff out the flame.
Yeah, I'm sure that's way more cost effective than just like making sure your local fire department has the funding it needs. Yeah,
well, this is kind of like the Greenland conversation. I mean, how much money is too much money to combat the Jewish space supremacy with their lasers?
Though, Matt, what you brought up is kind of interesting because it forces us to look at the country in a very different way. There's times when I will watch the way disasters play out in places like China, for instance, where, they had this gigantic flood and they're like, what happened? The city has a state-of-the-art drainage system. Then they looked at it and the drainage system goes down 6 feet and that's cemented in. They just did it because that's how all cities looked and they wanted to look like a city. And, that's in my mind, a very Chinese problem. But it's weird for me to suddenly hear that like, oh yeah, they just put fire hydrants up that weren't connected to the proper water pipe here in America so that water could run through them, and they were just doing it for looks, and then having to think that like how many other cities might be like that. And I've never wanted to admit that we live in like an inferior country in a lot of different ways. And this is making me kind of like face that idea and that concept in ways that I thought we just didn't do. I thought there were things that Americans were too diligent for. But I guess I have to adjust my priors here a little bit. I don't know. It's a weird little come to Jesus moment for me.
It is. It's crazy because we do want to, right? There are certain assumptions, and I think that it's true no matter what time period you live in or what country you live in, especially today, right? That I live in civilized society. I have access to these things, but I mean, the system can only sustain so much. You know what I mean? Like, think of how many people are in Los Angeles. Think about all of the different water systems, right? You have like water storage facilities, you have wells that are pumping into tanks, and not only to meet the daily needs of everybody that lives in that metroplex, which is an astronomical amount of water. I mean, they literally robbed the mountains with those aqueducts. You know what I mean? There's like, if you start driving it like the Central Valley up on, if you're on the western slope of the Central Valley, you start to see like there's just these like concrete chutes all of a sudden, and they're made to catch snowfall, funnel it into a place and then route it down to Los Angeles and San Diego, and then, some crops get irrigated along the way, but mainly it was designed to make sure that Los Angeles had water. And if you think about the sophistication and just the amount of water that the city is going through on just a regular day, and then all of a sudden you need to start opening up hydrants, you need to start pumping massive amounts of water, like the system gets strained. And it's one of those things that and the only reason I think about it is because I was confronted with it in the terms of like, hey, look, we have a problem in this local government and we have a very limited amount of dollars to deal with it. How do you try to make sure that all of a sudden like 60 miles of water infrastructure under roads that you need a tax base 7 times larger than we have to try to even maintain? Like, how do you fix that? It's a big problem to try to solve. And a lot of communities, I think, suffer from the same thing. And this is the flip side of and I sent a Venn diagram in our post in our group chat, and it kind of goes to that. It's like, look, you can have lower taxes and you can have less density, but the counter to that, what you lose is like services. And it's the same, it's all the same thing, right? It's like as an adult, right? Pick 3 things. You can have a social life, you can have a healthy relationship, and you can have sleep. And you can only pick 2 of the 3. It's the same thing with government. It's the same thing in our lives, right? We don't get it all. And this is the counter. And I'm not saying so let me clarify. I'm not saying the government is a great spender of our money, therefore we should just trust government with all of our money. I'm not saying that. But when we advocate for budget cuts, sometimes you get budget cuts in the places you don't want them to, right? If you're going to start cutting the budget, I would not have wanted to cut the budget $20 million of Los Angeles Fire. That's not there's got to be $20 million in that budget that I would have cut it way before. It's like, yeah, let's take $20 million from the fire department. And
and how much of it's like the hubris of man adding into it, though? I mean, you take an area that doesn't have a lot of water, you fill it with an ungodly amount of human beings. You start doing
people, and they're all trash.
Start farming avocados and almonds and just draining what little bit of water there is in the ground. You stop natural processes of natural burning. You put all this unnecessary stress on it. It's like there is an argument to be there of this is a problem that you've created that is going to be a perpetual spender, and there is no way out of it unless you just stop spending the money and go like, guys, I don't think all of you can really live in LA. I'm sorry. I know it's this beautiful paradise that you've created, but you've created it at the detriment of everything around you and of the own safety of your city. Not to be completely heartless to the people of LA, but it is like at some level, Mother Nature is putting the very real evidence in front of you right now that no, you cannot overcome this because shit's going to hit the fan if you continue to operate in the manner you are, and that you can spend a little bit of government money, but you're going to always get into this area where it's like, well, you got to keep spending because there's people there now. Then you can't just abandon these people. And even though we kind of founded this based on spending an incredible amount of money that shouldn't have been spent to completely change this area to an unsustainable method, you're never going to make it sustainable by spending more money. You have to start working within the natural processes of that land.
It's very unfortunate. And it is a conversation that's going to be had more and more as more places become uninsurable. I mean, that's happening in Los Angeles. There's a lot of people there. They talk about it's, and my surface level understanding is that it's illegal to raise insurance premiums in California. And so insurance companies just start dropping people. But that's happening here in New Mexico where I live. There are people that are buying houses and they cannot get it insured because underwriters are all it takes is one big fire and we're done for. And I live in one of those places. I think that I love where I live. I think it's a paradise. I think in the next 40 years, it will not exist because a big fire is going to roll through and it's going to get us all. And there's nothing that we can do about it. And if you could do, even if you could spend even if all of a sudden government is 100% on the up and up, we'll spend every dollar the most efficient, beneficial way. I still don't think where I live could be saved in the 100, you know what I mean? No amount of spending is going to stop like a big fire from just like blowing over the ridge, and oh, there goes all of our money, right? Because that's the thing that people don't understand about. And by no means, I'm not an expert on fires. I just have like a very surface level interaction with it. But that surface level interaction opened my eyes. There was that big fire this summer in, I can't remember what part of California, but they made like a 12 wide dozer line. I mean, that's huge, right? I mean, to think about like taking bulldozers and just crush everything to the ground. I mean, that's a massive fire break. They spent God knows how many dollars, how many man hours, all of the resources, energy to make what is probably the most effective fire break that you can have.
Bulldozers at least 6 feet for a small one, so you're probably looking at.
But no, we're talking about big
10 or
bulldozer.
12,
We're
yeah.
talking huge bulldozer. I mean, it was a massive fire break.
So like a football field wild, essentially.
More or less. Yeah. We're
Yeah.
talking about, 80 to 100 yards wide of just like bulldozing literally everything to create a fire break. And then the fire, like the wind picked up and the fire just jumped it. And they said, all right, well, we're done. Like we're abandoning this entire fire because there's nothing that we can do. And same, you know what I mean? Like my community doesn't have the resources. The federal government's not going to invest. And so
Sounds like somebody could sure use a flower bomb from space right about now.
doesn't flour make fires worse?
I think it's only good for grease fires.
I think flour is kind of flammable. I think it's something you can throw in fire to make like a nice dramatic magician's flurry of flame.
I thought
I think it might be sugar. I think sugar does, maybe not
I
flour.
thought flour made fires worse.
No, you know what? Actually, it's definitely sugar. Flour will snuff out a grease fire. In fact, that's what they tell you to use.
Yeah, it's the grease fire one. But it's still kind of hopeless to hear all this, and I want to believe it's not hopeless in some sense, because obviously we get more efficient and better at things every single year as things go on. But and there's the other aspect too. We don't live in like the perfect future, so we have to accept that there will be disasters every year that we're alive. Things are going to happen, and maybe the insurance companies are going to catch strays again, maybe literally again, because they're an easy target to blame. If you live in a state where the insurance company isn't allowed to raise premiums and insurance just kind of ditches you, you might just start looking at names and addresses, figuring out where the CEO lives, and going all Luigi again. And
Right.
It is interesting seeing
No.
this kind of like set up where the government has basically set up the insurance company as the fall guy per se. How many insurance CEOs can you shoot and like never solve a problem? It's possible we might end up seeing quite a bit of a backlash here, but I still can't get over the idea of decorative fire hydrants in America. There's something about that really just eats away at my core in ways that like I can't quite grasp just yet, because I understand like not having enough resources and maybe being like, yeah, the city water stops here, we don't have any hydrants further on, which is like I've seen that, I've experienced that, and there's places like that. But the idea that the city came in and just built decorative hydrants, so like even in the city's like jurisdiction.
You know what it really feels like to me is I bet there's some kind of guideline that says like, fire hydrant in this county has to be available per so many square miles, whatever. And I bet they get to a point where they're running low on money, and it's like, well, something's got to go up there. So we're going to put one of the Tonka truck.
So
with the 2-inch PVC.
So what it boils down to is like every community in America has something called an ISO, and it is what insurance companies use to rate.
What does ISO stand for, real quick?
God, I can't even. I don't even know. No, I actually don't even know. I just remember it's like my community was at a not good ISO, and it's like if you go to, it's like if we were at a 5, and if we went to a 7, then literally everybody loses their insurance.
Like, insurance service office, apparently.
Okay. I never even asked what ISO was in my 4 years of government. I just, you know what I mean? It's just like, doesn't sound good if it gets worse. And so I just assumed.
I hear that acronym a lot, and I was just curious if it was similar to the one I hear, but it's not.
Okay, fair enough. And so one of the things that dictates your ISO on the surface is how, like, is your house within 1,000 feet of a fire hydrant? Now they don't add, you know what I mean? Now there's no follow-up on like, oh, is this fire hydrant, is there enough infrastructure under the fire hydrant to make sure that there's like sufficient water to put out a fire? That's not necessarily on the questionnaire. The questionnaire is like, is there like, if you have a group of houses, is there a fire hydrant within 1,000 feet of it? And if you can check yes, well then, you know what I mean? All of a sudden, insurance companies are more likely to underwrite policies in your area, and so that's probably like a little bit of insight into why do you put up dummy fire hydrants? It might be one of those very unfortunate, like we sacrifice the few for the many, because, like, yeah, sure, like we all, right? It might be one of those unspoken things, like, yeah, we all know that if there's a fire in certain places, your house is going to burn. Like there's no, you know what I mean? In the community I live in, it's open knowledge. Like if you have a fire and you're like, God bless you. Hope you didn't get canceled, or I hope you were able to get insurance, because there's nothing that we can do. But if you can, you know what I mean? If you have certain streets or parts of the mountain that are going to burn, but it means that everyone else can, well, it's not great. But
maybe
I
this
also
is just the
don't.
opening for the market for those Hobbit style houses that are just mounds of dirt. Maybe we need to start from New Mexico to California, turn into Hobbits shires along the way.
Yeah, it's totally fair.
What do you think about this conspiracy I'm cooking up in my head here as we're having this conversation? So a lot of these insurance companies are definitely owned by BlackRock. I did a little Google search just to make sure that's true. As it goes with every single industry that exists, BlackRock does own a nice portion of them. BlackRock obviously very interested in buying up real estate as of recent. They like to nab up every Airbnb they can and make sure that nobody can buy a house and you can only rent from them. What if the grand play is pressure upon these insurance companies under the guise of it's just too expensive? We can't possibly write you guys new insurance plans, or your state has made it so that we cannot. Meanwhile, every hurricane, earthquake, mudslide happens right on the best land in this nation. It's all coastal, beautiful land. What if this is BlackRock's play to ultimately make it impossible to afford land along the coastlines, forcing the citizenry to sell most of their property in order to ultimately buy it up for pennies on the dollars, and then eventually make sure that the insurance companies, which they own in the first place, find a way to insure those lands once again?
Logan, it just sounds like BlackRock is trying to save us from global warming. They're getting us to move out of all of the low-lying places. We're buying up all the unsafe land.
It's for your protection. We do this for you.
Look, our insurance, we can't rebuild your house here, but we can buy you a plot of land and build a nice 7-bedroom McMansion in Kansas. You just got to move.
How does Topeka sound to you?
Tons of suburbs right outside of the casinos, which is great because we get to repay the native population we fucked over the first time.
Could I interest you in Slayton, Texas? It's like I know you have this beautiful beachfront property, but have you heard about how nice it is this time we were in Slayton?
Have you ever wanted to move to Manhattan? No, not that Manhattan.
We're talking about Kansas. They have a lovely university there. Some part of the University of Kansas, but Kansas State's respectable in terms of Kansas universities.
Damn, how do you know that, dude? I'm looking at Manhattan right now. That's wild.
How do you not know that? You were at Texas Tech. You listened to Kansas State beat the shit out of us every year.
Not that closely, man.
Maybe you weren't as emotionally invested as some of us.
You say some of us, man. I've been negative Nancy on Texas Tech now for what, 14 years?
Yeah, you are very
not hard to be negative on them, to be honest.
I mean, it's whatever, Logan. You're an eternal optimist, and I appreciate your fandom, but come on, bro. you gotta get with the program.
Someday we'll be decent again. I can't.
Oh yeah, sure. Yep, this year's our year, baby. As we've been saying this for a long time. And I mean, back to this whole, it's like, you know what? Maybe America's back on the map. Maybe this is our year. Did you guys happen to catch that exit interview with Joe Biden that was posted on USA Today?
No,
I don't think I did.
It was. I didn't watch the whole. I didn't even find a video of it. I just read the transcript, but it really, I don't know. Like, part of me made me feel bad for him as much as I can. He's a very unsympathetic character overall, and so I don't have a ton of sympathy. But the other part of me is like, man, that's like sad that you're doing like an exclusive with USA Today to try to like make your legacy, and you know what I mean. It's like the damage control to how you're going to be remembered on your way out of office.
To
It
be Joe
sucks.
Biden too, and the only tool you have left in the toolbox is your charisma and speech giving skills is rough.
Dude, for real. I mean, that says it all.
You gotta try to talk yourself out of this one.
There
Yikes.
were, and the worst part about it is there were several parts of the transcript where it's like it's ... inaudible ... and then and then and then the transcript moves on and you're like, oh no, it's like, what did he even say?
Too sleepy.
Damn, sounds like I really missed out on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I bet it's not worth watching, but I don't know. It's like, so what do you guys think about because the mayor is getting a lot of flack for being out of the city when this starts. Do you guys pay any credence to that? Are you guys upset that the mayor of Los Angeles is in Africa on some sort of diplomatic sightseeing tour when the big fire pops off, or is it just like wrong place, wrong time?
I do think it's a bad look. And same way Ted Cruz took off during the ice storm and went to.
He bailed on Texas. Do not
And
cover for Ted Cruz.
He's federal.
Yeah, I was about to say, I've had it's probably Keeper that made this argument to me before that like he's a federal employee. What's he actually supposed to do? And nobody should understand this better than politicians, because instead of actually doing the jobs they're elected to, they spend most of that time trying to get reelected, trying to make themselves
true.
Just as a person with a political mind, you shouldn't be so stupid as to abandon the people that elected you during a state of an emergency. Like you just have to know that if you go on vacation while everybody who voted for you is suffering, it's not going to look good in your next election. It's just
to be fair, though,
in my mind.
The disaster starts like she didn't leave in the middle of it, right? She's already out of the country when it starts.
And it started.
Yeah,
that's fair.
I don't really have a problem with this. This is just kind of a function of being a mayor in like a tier 1 city, like Eric Adams in New York. Like he's always in another country. She's in LA. She's going to be in other countries as well. I think it's a problem. These cities, like their profiles have almost gotten too large to the point where like what they're doing.
It's like being the quarterback for the Jets.
It's
like you could have in Minnesota, nobody'd care. But because you're in New York with the New York media, you're just gonna be a bigger spotlight. That's fair. That's probably the same thing could be said for Ted Cruz. Like they were having ice storms in Oklahoma. If that governor was gone, none of us would have given a fuck. And to that point, I couldn't tell you who that governor was.
Like Cruz is federal, and like the Senate wasn't even in session, and he wanted to take a vacation with his family during the holidays. I don't really have a problem with it at that point. Like, what are you going to do? Senate's not in session anyways. You're going to go stand on Capitol Hill, look around, and then go home. I don't know. I don't know what you want. But, like, I mean, this is like the mayor of like a tier 1 city. And unfortunately, it means that she's just going to be gone a lot because, like, at that level, you've got a bunch of diplomatic missions because, like, your city is home to like 10 million embassies, and they're always trying to get something done. And they want you to do this or that. I understand it. I don't like it, but like it's not really her fault. Like personally, in my like dream world, I'd love it if the mayor actually just stayed in their city and was there all the time. But like at cities where the profile is that large, I think they're just going to be gone, and like we just kind of have to deal with it. Maybe she should have been a bit careful about like what her interns were posting on her social media while she was gone. But at the same time, like, I don't really think that's like exactly her job there. And like, obviously it is a problem. She's dropped the ball in a few ways. We can all look at like cutting the budget to fire after a fire and be like, well, that was a boneheaded move. But, if they got lucky and they didn't have a wildfire this year, which they never do, but like if they did, it might have looked smarter. I don't really know if we can really blame her. And I think it's tough. It's one of these things where like, just the same way that like people are like looking for conspiracies and making up all sorts of boneheaded nonsense, I think we also have an urge to like look for villains where we can find them and like point the easy fingers at them. And like it's really tough. And California does actually get like a decent bit of like rain and snow water, but like they are kind of forced to let at least half of it drain out into the ocean. Otherwise, there's like even bigger problems. And I know this doesn't like affect LA, but like the Bay in San Francisco, for instance, it's brackish. It's half saltwater, half freshwater because there's a certain amount of inflow into it from all of the rivers that flow in. And if you wanted to say capture some of that snow water that comes in, some of that meltwater, and fill up a reservoir, which you certainly could, and have water for a long time and no droughts in San Francisco, you suddenly have a bay that gets really salty, really smelly. A lot of species die, and suddenly like that, all of that real estate gets a lot less attractive, and maybe there's more long-term damage than like a a fire could do in that area. And I wonder if it's kind of the same thing in LA where it's bad optics, but maybe the right intentions. Like I don't know on that one. Like obviously I want to blame Gavin Newsom. Like he's a little goblin. I don't like him, but I don't know if he's at fault. I want to blame the mayor of LA.
It's Gavin Newsom's fault.
Newscom. It's always him. Yeah, I want to blame the mayor too.
Just as like and I know nothing about water salination or the amount of money or undertaking it would be to create this system, but being an area that's so dry and that close to the ocean, is there just no possibility of building sort of an inland canal type of system that goes 20, 30 miles inland up a hill? One of these, you've seen these canal systems where they levee the water and rise it so that the boats can change levels in these when they're going over different terrain in these canal systems, simply with the idea of just pumping water up. I mean, you could even just do a water pump system sort of thing to the ocean and out deep enough that it's not going to get interrupted by the tides, just to pump water up to a natural water distillation type of apparatus. You have in the same way you make a water safe siphon that they sell a lot of these like survivalist sites, or you can even make them by like layering charcoal and sand in the right manner so that it filters out any impurities in the water. I wonder if there's not a possibility to build essentially a dam system that just runs through, just kind of create a man-made river and just have a natural salinating system to create a new lake, essentially.
You can, and desalinization is less expensive than people think. The big problem with it is like if you scale it too large, you have a lot of waste, salt, and brine that you struggle to find uses for. There's only so much iodine tablets you can make and whatever else they make out of brine. And eventually you just have this waste product that's piling up. And to the levels at which California consumes water, I don't think they could desalinate in a manner that would make a dent for them. Yeah, so I don't know. Unless we figure out like a way to make energy out of salt, for instance, like I think it's one of those kind of dead ends, unfortunately. Because it's really promising technology, and it's not that expensive. You get fresh water out of salt water, and you get a byproduct that has some industrial uses. But once you get past the point where you're using it and where it's just kind of piling up, it just kind of sucks.
Keep pouring it back into the ocean until you pickle everything in there.
I mean, do you treat the salt like nuclear waste to a point where it's like we're just gonna have this thing that we're gonna have to pile here and it's gonna be useless and we're gonna make land unavailable?
Let's just launch it into space and get our Saturn ring. Let's just have our salt ring around the Earth. Launch it up into orbit.
Honestly, if Elon gets the cost per ton of lift into the space. Wow, that was a horrible sentence. If Elon decreases the cost of moving cargo to space, there is a future where we could just make a ring out of it.
Elon moves stuff good. Elon moves stuff better. Good with me.
If I ever end up in like an Idiocracy time capsule, I will be able to blend in way too well.
Maybe we we take the spaceship out of it altogether and just have like acceleration rings, like you see in some of those old space sci-fi concepts. When they reach hyperspeed, you got to go through the rings that shoot you off. The same concept, but we just like have a catapult lined up to these acceleration rings, so it just shoots it out of orbit, gets it out of the atmosphere without any jet propulsion.
I don't know
That
how.
would be kind of cool.
I don't know how expensive or how hard it would be, but why don't we just like launch our waste towards the sun? You know what I mean? Like,
I've always
we're
thought that.
Like
That was a big deal a couple years ago where somebody said something about launching waste into space, and people were like, "What a stupid idea!" And I was like, "Why?"
There's a giant, there's like a giant incinerator at the center of our solar system that I don't know propels life. So I don't know, like, why not just launch all of our waste towards? And while we're at it, we'll get the minorities too. Just kidding.
You don't want to start a grease fire.
I don't think anything bad could happen. Like, how much larger than the Earth is the sun? Like 81 million times or some nonsense? I don't know the
God,
number.
I have no idea. It's
but, like,
so
we could
much
probably
larger.
toss the entire Earth into the sun and make no difference.
Oh, it
You wouldn't
can't
even
matter.
Wouldn't even see it happen from our perspective. It just it's gone.
Yeah, I see no reason why we couldn't just incinerate all of our trash. What's the worst that would happen? Space might smell bad for a little while. We can
Yeah, because we're so worried
vacuum
about
smell doesn't
the
carry.
vacuum and all these other inhabitants of our solar system. We're so concerned about how they feel.
Maybe the only negative repercussion I can think of is that it finally brings down the alien HOA on our white trash planet for launching shit into space.
The intergalactic HOA steps in where it's like, all right, enough's enough. It's like, it's bad.
We've been
enough
trying
you
to
guys
sell
are-
Mars for 100,000 years, and you fucking bald monkeys are really destroying the market out here. Nukes going off, launching shit into space.
I
Yeah,
like
we're really
it.
no good over here. We're the bad kids. The bad kids of the solar system, man.
We're the only kids in the solar system. We don't care what anyone else thinks. We're only childs. You know what I mean?
That's
Yeah,
a fun
we got-
answer to the Fermi paradox that I've always liked, that we're actually biological weapons, and that like our whole line of DNA is to create humans. Essentially, it's like we evolve along these routes, but ultimately have a design directed evolution that brings us to being these hairless monkeys who are obsessed with nuclear war and climatically destroying a planet. So it's like our whole DNA line is a transpermia method of destroying adversarial planets by placing
Just
these,
like the ultimate form of
these
cancer.
monkeys. Yeah, we're essentially we're the xenomorphs.
Like
that
we
think
are
of
like
an
we
alien.
are the cancer.
That
And
we're the
I'm
thing
sure,
that's in
like,
there. And right now we're just on
Space
ice.
Minecraft is
There's
up
not a
there.
space war going on. They don't want us destroying any other planets, so we like have our planet, and that's why we have all these stories about natural disasters that send us back to the Stone Age, because when they're not done taking us off of ice yet, they don't want us getting off planet either, so they kind of launch something at us every once in a while. All right,
Big old
fucking
solar flare. It's like, this will send him back 10,000 years.
Put them back a little bit until we get to fighting the intergalactic war of Xenon 5.
There is I don't know how much longer you guys want to go, but I do want to play catch up, and I am woefully unprepared for this, so I've got to defer to you guys. What are your thoughts on the Cybertruck? You know, it's like any more insights, any less insights, more confusing, less confusing, worth talking about, not worth talking about. I'm just curious what you guys think about it.
Definitely
it's still a huge
curious.
clusterfuck,
Like,
man.
I was about to say, I feel like you've done more research into this than I have, but I did find at least it was curious. And now both being from Fort Bragg, not a huge one because this is a gigantic base, but there were a lot of at least eyebrow raising congruencies between this guy and the guy down in New Orleans. Enough so that it just kind of makes me go, this is fascinating that there's enough connections between the two, I guess, or similarities between the two. But yeah, you've been sending us unhinged group text about this, Keith. What have you gotten on this that we haven't gotten to?
Well, the Cybertruck one, it's still a huge mess. Like, there's still just a bunch of like huge unanswered questions. Like right now, for instance, there are 2 manifestos circling around, and No one seems to agree on which is the real one. I think it's fairly clear which is the real one. There's a really boring one out there. I didn't even finish reading
The
it.
boring was actually the owner's manual for the Tesla truck.
Oh, of course, it's got instructions for downloading the Jihad update, man.
It's a very inclusive company.
But there's the gigantic argument still going on right now where some people think that he was speaking in code while he was giving all these incorrect facts about his life in the fake manifesto. And then the real manifesto is just, honestly, I wish I'd read it. I can't even think of a single point from the real manifesto. It was utterly boring. And I apologize for not reading it. Otherwise, I might have had something useful to say here. But I don't know if the coincidences really matter between these two yet, because we still don't even know if this was like intentional, if he did it, or if like his body was just planted there and someone remote detonated the thing.
Well, he's already dead.
Some people think it's possible. There was that whole
he's already
story.
Dead and like strapped up, and they just blow it up.
There was that story initially that he had been shot in the head with a Desert Eagle that was found in the car. But from looking at, like, there's video of him driving around in the city. There's video of him getting out of the truck and walking around in a parking lot. And there's video of the truck blowing up, and you can see him kind of moving around inside before it blows up. It kind of feels like that whole story about him having been shot in the head that came out of the Las Vegas PD. Maybe it's wrong. Like, I don't know. Maybe the gun went off during the explosion and happened to hit him in the head, and we got like the worst set of coincidences ever to send us down like a wild goose chase. I mean, shit happens sometimes.
How bad the feds were when the LAPD like accidentally incorrectly said he was shot in the head, and now they have to go through and deal with every conspiracy theory about how this is all an inside job, and they're like, I don't know, some fucking psycho blew himself up and the LAPD lied about what happened. I don't know. What do you want us to say?
Yeah. I mean, you get one press conference and suddenly everyone's posting the little contraption from the Shooter movie where what's his face almost shot himself in the head, and it's like, get me out of here. It's tough to say. And in the fake manifesto, apparently he's trying to get to the Mexican border and the feds are following him and whatnot. But then, Tesla's got this cute little map of all the charging stations he stopped at on his way to Las Vegas. And it looked like he did some sightseeing in New Mexico. Took what
beautiful state, by the way.
Yeah, okay. I think he was just taking the most efficient route to find all the charging stations he could. Because everyone's like, why didn't he take the direct route through the mountains? And I was like, I don't know. Maybe there aren't enough charging stations up there.
Because there's not. There's none.
There aren't.
Yeah, we have a mutual friend who was out in San Diego station and had to drive his Tesla back to Lubbock, and he said it added an hour or two to the drive. Not insane amount of time, but enough that you have to pay attention to where charging stations are along the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You got to pre-plan your stops. It kind of sucks. You don't get to have the whole like je ne sais quoi of driving a gas-powered car, stopping willy-nilly and just discovering the world as it falls into your lap.
And destroying the ozone as we go.
Gas-powered cars.
Say what, Logan?
I said, don't put that gay French word on my gas-powered vehicles. V8s.
Hold on. That's the French word for starting a war, man. That's how they do it. You gotta have a certain je ne sais quoi.
The hell did you call me?
But yeah, the whole Cybertruck thing, it's still a huge mess. I think no one really knows what happened or what's going on. Nobody is really able to tell us if he did the detonation or if it was done remotely. No one's able to tell us if he was shot in the head or if he was still alive. We have video, maybe. Who can say? He's got weird text messages to his ex-girlfriend. He has a wife who he divorced previously. They got remarried to again. And people are unsure now if they are still together, if they're getting divorced. Like, every aspect of his life is kind of up in the air. The only thing we do know is that he had some interesting service in autonomous vehicles and unmanned drones. And he had recently been seen on LinkedIn replying for people who are asking for people who have specific clearances to do jobs related to unmanned vehicles in Ukraine, only like 8 or 9 months ago. And no one knows if he did the operation, what the operation was or whatnot, but people are speculating maybe it had something to do stateside, but I don't see a guy like that doing something stateside. It doesn't make any sense. From what I can tell, he was a car guy, only a couple years older than us. I think he was like 37, 38. joined the military, special forces, was involved mainly in drone and unmanned vehicle work with special forces, and looked like he rented a Tesla Cybertruck he was excited about, and something happened at some point on the drive, and no one can tell us what. That's about where we're at right now.
That's crazy. Like, do you think that, like, do you think somebody, like, do you think he sets off with the intention, like a Timothy McVeigh, like, I'm gonna, it's like, I have this grievance against what, Trump Tower, it's like, whatever it is, and you purposely do it, or is it like, did
I
you
don't
get
think you're quite that.
co-opted along the way? And someone's like, if you don't do this, it's like all of these people are going to suffer. Because I just wonder about like what it takes, like the level of fanaticism to believe in anything, that you're willing to make a car bomb and sit in it as it goes off. Like, I don't understand that level of belief in literally anything, that I'm willing to do that.
I think it's less conscious than that. When they say the keyword in the MK Ultra program, I think you just kind of zombie out.
The one question I have that no one has asked is like, what was he doing on New Year's Eve? How did he celebrate New Year's? Because like, if he went and shot off a bunch of fireworks and then just had some leftover the next morning, like the question answers itself. But no one seems to have like dug into what he was doing the night before.
Way too much ayahuasca and had a psychiatric break. To make a fireworks bomb in his car.
It should be sacred and not accessible.
Yeah.
Back to a previous conversation, dude. The downfall of society. It's a real thing. Like, gatekeeping should be a real thing. Like, there should be a lot more gatekeeping and a lot more bullying in the world. And the world being more inclusive is not a good thing. I'm a firm believer in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like, getting back to this, I think people are just too worked up in general. Anytime anything happens, people are like, oh, it's an attack, it's ideological, and they're already like diving into it. And like, that's why we have like 10 million conversations and Tesla sending engineers to look into this. And the reality is, I think the most likely thing is it was just a fireworks accident, and we have turned it into a molehill because it was in a Tesla vehicle outside of the Trump Hotel. And the guy has some sort of special forces background, but like he wasn't even ideological. If you look at him online and like his entire internet presence, he was playing World of Tanks the day before. He posts about his car that he's importing. He likes BMWs. Like, there's literally nothing you can find online that's remotely like, I'm gonna blow myself up. Like, at all you can find is him playing games, him fixing his car, and him talking to his ex-girlfriend like a regular dude. Like, it's just, I think we just want there to be something there just because like the optics make it into like a fun story for us,
Yeah.
There's and the coincidence of timing with another big catastrophic event in Baton Rouge,
New Orleans.
It's interesting too because that one is like much more obviously political. And nobody's digging into that guy. He's got an ISIS flag on his truck. He runs over people. The Airbnb he stayed at caught fire. And so the whole place burned down right after he left.
How convenient.
Yeah, exactly. And no one's even asking like, oh, who is this guy? What happened? Where did he get his orders? Like, he drove across from Mexico. He's American, but he was in Mexico like the day before and drove across. The plates got scanned that day. What was he doing? Who was he meeting? Nobody cares. They're just looking at the Ritterberger, whatever his name is, and we're deep diving into text with his girlfriend. It's interesting how kind of like backwards our attention is in this, just because it was Trump Tower and a Tesla Cybertruck.
Yeah.
If this guy had rented a Cybertruck and ran people over and had a Trump flag on the back, it would have been a very different, conversation in New Orleans. But,
it is interesting how, like, what actually gains our attention and what drives the media narrative, right? Because I'm sure that my guess is that New Year's Eve is one of the most chaotic and worst times to be like a first responder. You know what I mean? I bet to be a paramedic in any major city, New York, like New Year's Eve is a horrific time to be on. It's like, not only do I have to deal with like the normal run of the mill, traumas that happen just in everyday life, but now like fireworks, people lose fingers, people lose hands. Now there's fights because people are drunk, all this. And so I'm sure that there were hundreds of episodes of horrible things that happened on New Year's Eve, but how these two things kind of the media and how we fixate on one more than the other, to your point though, but how these two things kind of capture what our attention. It's very interesting, and I don't know what that tells about us. I'm not smart enough to know what it says about us. It says something, but I'm not sure what.
It does. And, interesting, there was a mass shooting on New Year's Day as well in Brooklyn. No one really talks about it. I think it was like 11 or 12 people were shot at a club. We discovered like, oh, it's gang violence. Trash.
Nerd.
ISIS, that's fucking yesterday. Trash. Trump and Tesla, that's hot. Yes. That's all it is, man. We just are suckers for the drama. And if we don't have like a cool new show to watch, like if Squid Game 2 was more interesting, maybe we wouldn't have even talked about the Tesla bombing. Who knows? Yeah. I also haven't watched Squid Game season 2 yet, so I
haven't either. So I don't know, but
I was, I guess, pleasantly a little bit surprised and happy that we didn't find something linking the Tesla truck to somewhere in the Middle East. Because when I heard of 2 attacks on the first, with all of this and every fear I have of the worst possible outcome with Trump, it seems to all have to do with heightened tensions in the Middle East. I was really worried this was a little bit of the 9/11 treatment of like, hey, 2 muzzies got you guys. It's January 20th, time to start marching boots on the ground in Israel, putting them back down in their place. So I guess that's my optimistic take. I'm glad we're still questioning it and not blaming Muslims for this and figuring out ways
there's no babies dying outside of incubators yet.
Yeah, they put the babies in the microwaves.
Yeah, because the incubators aren't good enough now. It's like
that's not too of like, if you're a radical jihad Muslim, probably not many better places to attack than a football game in America, which is kind of like America's religious event at this point in a continually secular society. Like, what do we worship more than American football? And especially specifically a game between one of the largest Protestant and the largest Catholic team in the nation,
That's fair.
You can easily sneak a car bomb in, hit them while they're still tailgating. All you got to do is pay for VIP parking, and that's it.
Yeah, you couldn't be any better if they had a Jewish school would be the only thing,
Are they good at football?
Team. They probably wouldn't make a game fair.
I hear they're good at hiding in attics, but
very good in debate. Very good. All the other colleges owe them money somehow.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say one thing that's gotten like lost in all the excitement of the moment. Day one, Trump, you're gonna owe me $5, Matt. Do you remember?
I don't. I have no idea.
He's gonna free Ross Ulbricht, dude. I feel it in my bones.
Oh, I forgot about that bet. Dude,
Day one of Trump's admin, I think, is gonna be a lot of fun. And I think we've kind of forgotten about many of the promises that were made and things that are easily achievable on day one. And I think we have some things to look forward to that like we can consider broad wins. And I'll be surprised if Greenland is a day one thing, but I think we got a lot of wins coming to us.
You know what I mean? Like Greenland is a day one. That's very ambitious. So you know what? There's going to be a lot of all right. This is a question that I think is interesting. How do you guys feel along the same vein, right? Because there's going to be a lot of Trump allies. They're going to be pardoned, and he's not going to draw it out to the end of his. He's not going to draw it out to the end of his administration, like most presidents wait, because pardons are very politically. It's a hot potato, So I don't think he's going to draw it out, but there's going to be a lot of like whoever his in the documents case in Florida, and I can't think of their names. Those guys, they're being pardoned day one. There's some others, and so if Ross Ulbricht is in there, that's fantastic. Like whatever. You sold drugs on Silk Road. You facilitated Americans buying drugs. Nothing the CIA and the federal government hasn't done better than anyone else throughout our human history. So like, spare me your moral high ground. You're upset you didn't get your cut. Let's be real. How do you guys feel about J6ers being pardoned? Do you think it should be blanket pardons for everybody? Do you think it should be a case by case? Because he said, he hasn't like come out and said, I'm going to pardon everybody, but that's kind of from a legal standpoint, there's a lot of people that are very curious to see what happens with J6ers in prison. What do you guys think about that?
I think at this point it just has to be blanket. Like it's already been 4 years.
Like even if you're, like even if there's overwhelming evidence you helped beat officer so and so in the head after you took his baton in whatever weird hallway that was, like even those people, everybody.
Even those.
Okay.
At this point, I mean, it's been 4 years. I didn't see anything from people in J6 where I was like, well, that's 10 years, that's 15 years, that's 20 years. They've for the most part been treated fairly awful in prison from what I've heard. I mean, some of them are still in jail. They haven't even been like officially charged yet. So they're kind of like in this weird, like, I don't know. Which is the amendment where you need a speedy and fair trial? Is it the 7th?
I can't. I don't know. It's one of the first 10. I can give you that much. It's in your Bill of Rights.
I mean, at this point, it feels like blanket ones are required. I know some people want to caveat it and say, like, as long as you weren't violent or you didn't commit vandalism or whatnot. But I don't even know how at this point you can make the distinction to the point where someone would need more than they've already taken. I think as a symbolic move as well, it's better to just do a blanket pardon. I know that there are many people who'd like to see some sort of like middle ground walked here. But I just don't think it's worth the manpower to actually go through it.
So do you think that it's almost one of the, do you think it's, to put in historical perspective, do you think this is like a reconstruction type area where you've got to just look at it and be like, yeah, there was a bad, you know what I mean? It's like we're just going to move forward, and there's going to be a lot of things that probably shouldn't be swept under the rug, but we're just going to, for the sake of moving forward as a country, we're just going to move forward. But do you think that doing that makes the country more united or more divided? Because I still know people in my personal life that think that January 6th was literally the worst thing that's ever happened to our democracy, short of the Civil War. And
yeah. I mean, wasn't someone on The View like 2 or 3 days ago and said it was like one of the worst days, including the Holocaust, including World War II, including 9/11?
It's heavy.
It's kind of wild.
It's pretty wild. I mean, it's like, yeah, like we just like burned like 12 million people,
Yeah.
But yeah, J6.
They don't have time to burn when a nuclear bomb goes off.
You've been banned from using the calculator app.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty close to Kiefer on that. Like, I think in a perfect world, you could go through there and say, like, well, who committed actual acts of violence? I don't think I would go as far as vandalism even, but maybe there would be an area where, in your example, if you stole a baton from a cop and beat him to a pulp, I could see why those people shouldn't get the same kind of blanket pardon. However, there's no feelings you're going to hurt that we're ever going to vote for any Trump subsidiary in the future, even though it's not him running directly in the future. Hopefully, that you're not hurting your own political position. Like, you can talk about divide, but who's the person that now becomes an absolute Trump hater after this that didn't already hate Trump? I don't think it's anybody. I don't think there's that many people that are really going to be, at least not a large enough portion that's really going to matter. And I think he kind of owes it to them because he missed the opportunity to do it the first time too. Like, he should. Well, I guess not really, because it was after he's already out. But like, he had 14. No, it wasn't. He was still in office for a minute there. He had an opportunity to hand out pardons, and
but I'm still trying to
these backs,
I'm still trying to stay in office. I can't worry about, you know what I mean? It's like, if you think about like what Trump's, like what his problems and what he's actually trying to accomplish between January 6th and January 21st, like, dude, who's got time to worry about, you know what I mean? It's like, who's got time to worry about the peasants?
It wouldn't help his case either when the thing vaulted against him is that you tried to pull off an insurrection and then you pardoned everybody that took part of it. Like, that's of course a good talking point for the other side. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think the only thing that could hurt him here is if he continues to turn his back to people who went to bat for him and doesn't help them. That could potentially hurt his base a bit, moving into whatever political agendas he has in the future, or for whatever amalgamation that takes in the next candidate that he wants to influence, whether that's Donald Trump Jr. or
Vance
Mr.
or
Vance or whatever
yeah,
it is.
yeah. There's, and I don't know if they made this part of the podcast, but on Monday, Michael Smerconish had two guys that live in the Philadelphia area, and they ended up representing Donald Trump in his second impeachment. It's William J. Brennan and Michael Vandervee are their names, but he had them. He had both of them in studio on his show on Monday talking, and because they ended up representing a lot of J6ers, and he had, like they just talked about, like, well, this is why we do it. We're criminal defense attorneys, and there was a lot of compelling, like their statement, right? He's like, look, we're criminal defense attorneys. Full stop. This is what we do. We defend people that are being charged by the federal government or state government, and this is just what we do. But their takes was like, J6 was politicized. He's like, we've never seen the amount of money thrown at, it's like, we've never seen this type of fierce prosecution. And there's a lot of people that had literally nothing to do with anything that you would consider criminal that got wrapped up in this. And he's like, we fiercely defend these people. And what was so interesting is the backlash of people that called into the show during that hour. You're just, you know what I mean? And now they're accusing Michael Smerconish, who's done nothing but just ask questions. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just facilitating the conversation. There's like, you're a Trump sympathizer and you've shown your true colors. And it's like, you're going to have these numbnuts and they should go have intercourse with themselves. To which the best response was, he's like, like one of the lawyers is like, I love the word numbnuts. He's like, that's great. Thank you for giving me that insult because it's one of my favorite words in the English language. But it was crazy to see two people who were just like, all I'm here to do is make sure that American civil rights, like your God-given rights, are actually protected. And then the backlash of just kind of the community at large is like, no, they should all go to jail. They should all be tried for treason and be hung. And there's, I don't know, it's like, that's not what this country is built on. And it was wild to see, even 4 years later, how divisive and toxic of an issue that J6 is.
Well, it also begs the question, like, who listens to Smerconish? Is he going to get a lot of people from the Washington area? Philadelphia is not so far away from Washington either. Or does he have Philadelphia listeners? And I don't know, because the lawyer's in Philadelphia. I'm just tossing it out. But, I think it depends on like who his listener base is. I think, broadly speaking, within the culture, things aren't moving any further left. They're only moving right.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, being concerned about appeasing the left in ways that don't make sense to interest from the right are kind of pointless. It's like when you're winning and the enemy's retreating and you're like, guys, should we stop charging now? It's like, no, just keep going.
No, the route is where most casualties, you know what I mean? The route is where most casualties happen when they run in panic. That's when you send your cavalry is not for charging headfirst into solid lines. It's for running down people that are already retreating.
Yeah, don't take a victory lap just because Ellen DeGeneres moved out of this country. There's plenty of other libtards we got to run out of here.
Did she actually move?
Yeah, she moved to England.
Hell
she
yeah.
said it was unrelated, but
I'm sure it has nothing to do with her lawsuits, but
she moved right when the Diddy stuff started coming out too.
Yeah, I'm sure it has nothing to do with that. I'll take it as a win though. If we don't,
that was a guy that I would have had his back 5 years ago because of a very passionate video that came out of him, like crying about child trafficking. And Ashton Kutcher has had a little bit of an interesting kind of turn with that too, where he was very like in organizations against human trafficking, and then he suddenly skipped country when Diddy stuff started coming out, I believe.
Yeah, he also lost a lot of public sentiment when he defended his friend that was being sentenced for rape. You know what I mean? It's hard to. It's like, he's our friend, we believe in him, and it's like, well, he's just been convicted of rape, so yeah. Well, that's great news. If only we could get the view, like, If the View, dude, if we could get the View to move to England, or I don't know, an asteroid hit.
Yeah, talk about
their
snuffing
studio.
things out from space. I'd love to see something come out and bomb the View studio.
I don't want to see. So that's the thing. I'm
A
not
big bag of
advocating
flour,
for
right?
violence. I don't want to see. I don't
Not
wanna
violence. I'm talking about justice from the universe. Like
It's a meteor. It's
a meteor
you know
from
what I
another
mean. It's a
galaxy
meteor. That's
taking
what
out
I
the
want to
worst part
see.
of the world.
For sure, the world is okay. Well, that's interesting. I'm just curious what you guys think about it, because, and there's also like, I don't know how much you guys paid attention a few days ago about the news and how it talked about J6, and they're like, oh, we've beefed up all the security and nothing went off. Like there was no problems because of all these things. Like, yeah, I mean, come on. Like Joe Biden's been asleep for the last 2 years. They're not one-to-ones. Like you don't have Joe Biden out there saying, you better fight like hell and you got to come to the cap. There's no like sleep. What interview?
This is America, man.
It wasn't that long ago Biden put on a Trump hat, you know. I don't even think he cares.
Joe wore red to the voting booth.
Yeah. We'll
We'll be
never know.
actively against him at this point, you know.
We will never know. He is that level of petty. That is certainly possible. And who knows? That could have been Joe Biden's J6, you know, showing up and voting for Trump. But I don't know. We'll see. We will see. Sorry, I'm rambling. When do y'all talk?
Go ahead. No. What do you
No. I forgot my sentence and I started like using filler words. When I say like we will see and I don't know, that's my brain like, wait, come on, let's pedal a little bit, see if we can get
me. I've been there before. You stretch for another 2 minutes to get your thought back and it doesn't come back.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm sorry. I've been talking about nothing a minute now. Well, y'all want to do one more little brain teaser and wrap it up today?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a good call.
All right, this one's less of a question and more just an observation that I had that I thought was quite interesting. So the entire like goth punk movement walks hand in hand with anti-conformity, right? It's all about not fitting into the social norms and being your own dark little prince or princess and not adhering to social norms. However, I find it very curious that in that same vein, if you refer to a chick, like there was a waitress the other day who I said, oh, the goth waitress. And a buddy of mine who had dated her for a second said, oh, she doesn't like that. She's and I forget even what kind, but she was a specific type of vampire chick. So I just think it's really interesting, the incongruency of being a person whose entire identity is wrapped up in being nonconformist and then having infinitely specific sub-niches and categories that you're very touchy about. If somebody labels you the wrong kind of demi-Wiccan vampire deity or gothic new age punk rock bitch, whatever the category is you're in. Or if y'all had any thoughts on that.
I do. I think that it taps into this greater need for people to feel special in a world that is overwhelmingly saturated in so many ways. I think there's this weird, and it's not weird, there's just a desire for us to feel special. I want to be unique. I am different some way. And so it's the same thing. It's like everybody polices themselves the hardest. You know what I mean? When you get into certain subgroups, like start talking to, he's not a reggae player. He hasn't played reggae. That's ska. You know what I mean? To like the outside observer, like what's the difference? And it's okay. Something that you guys will understand. It is the same argument of like, oh, he's a snowboarder. Oh, he's a skier. To us, there's big differences. There's infightings. We will argue till the sun comes up anew and the moon has like wandered away from the Earth's orbit. We will argue the differences amongst our species. But to the rest of the world, you're all just a bunch of rich people that play really on the snow.
To unite you, all it really takes to galvanize both those groups is just one gay surfer from California with upspeak, and you're like, yeah, fuck that. That's so much.
But it's the same thing. It's like to the rest of the world, we're all just rich people that play on the snow, and to us, there's irreconcilable differences, like two plankers, one big board, one sideways, the other can't, like one can't go through flat grounds, the other sucks on a powder day. Things that nobody else cares about. And I think it's all the same thing. Like, we feel like we're special, but we're not. Like, to the rest of the world, we're just a bunch of rich punks that play on the snow. The same thing with the goths. I think it's
what bothers me within this context, though, is that the entire goth thing is a movement of non-conformity. And then it's like, I don't conform, and yet I have to wear a vial of blood necklace around my neck, or I'm not a vampire chick anymore. So I have to still wear the uniform, even though I don't conform.
It's the same thing as wearing a jersey while you ski. I'm a non-conformist conformist. Do you know what I mean? It's all the same. I think it's all the same. It's like, we all want to feel special, and we police ourselves in the attempt to make ourselves a little bit better and more important than we are. And I see it all as this. It's all the same energy.
I would say that identity is actually a very important part of our self-esteem. And it's very tough for people to like lose identity or get rid of identity or like walk without it. And, maybe like the roots of your identity are supposed to be about nonconformity, but like, that's not what it is to you. And, maybe to you, it's just part of who you are and what you are. And, when you're missing those signifiers of who you are, it's hard for you to step outside and still be the same person. And I think this is something that like men grapple with in ways that like we don't understand. For instance, like usually your identity, like you have bits of it. So first, maybe you're in high school and you're part of a group or a social group, or you do a certain thing. And then like, okay, you go to work or you go to college. And if you're in college, your identity is like whatever your major is. And then you're done with college, you go work now, and you're part of the group that works. And your identity is whatever job you're in, whatever your career you're in. And like, as a man, you understand it when you go out to social functions and you meet people. The second question people ask is usually like, what do you do? And what they're really asking is, who are you? But like,
and what's your value?
Phrase it. Yeah, they're asking,
what's your value into society? Like, what's your value to me in a lot of ways?
And the way that you answer that as a man is like how you feel about yourself. It's a story you tell yourself to feel comfortable with like the fact that you're just this weird living, breathing thing on the space rock. And, every time it goes in a circle around the flaming ball, you have to get up and go do something, but you don't really know why. And that story is an awful one to tell yourself. It's kind of like nihilistic in some sense and like depressing in another. And so instead you tell yourself that like, I'm a welder, or I'm an engineer, or I'm an accountant. And because those answers are like satisfying, but like
instead of I'm a hairless monkey having an existential crisis about existence.
Exactly. Instead,
no one likes that answer.
You wake up and you make up your bed to keep the darkness away. And, I would say that maybe for this woman, in her sense, being a vampire is the same as like me being an accountant or something like that, And if an accountant shows up and someone asks, what do you do? And they say, oh, I'm an accountant. Or actually, no, here's a better one. A dentist shows up and says, I'm a dentist. And someone's like, oh, so not a real doctor. Pain, it hurts in much the same way that like, you called the vampire a goth, she's like, no, I'm more than a goth. I'm a vampire, or whatever she is, whatever version she is.
I like the angst that any goth person would feel to you, equating them to being, it's just the same thing as you being an accountant to me.
It is.
Being called a dentist.
I bought so many black bracelets to not be like everybody else.
Well, the humanity.
I would say that work is the way that men can understand identity for the most part. Because like, I would say that we struggle to pick them in ways that other groups or people might have picked. Because it's kind of like, what's the point? Whatever. But we are picking one when we go to work, and we're conforming to all the different things that job might require. You might ask yourself, why does every single mechanical engineer kind of talk the same way unless they're a sales engineer? And, it's because they look around, they see people and like, oh, this is my identity. And they take on those signifiers in much the same way that this woman has taken the vial of blood and put it around her neck because she looked around, saw the signifiers, and is trying to like be comfortable with the fact that she's alive. So, I would say
bitches have blood vials.
You gotta offer her a little grace, man.
while we were doing that, I just did like a quick Google search on subcategories of goth. And this doesn't even include your punks and your vampires and your what's the other goth but not goth word? There's an emo. Is the other
the emos. I remember
Emos.
those.
But just the quick rundown is Google's 14 subcategories of goth. They got romantic goth, new goth, new hippie goth, death rock, gothabilly, which is pretty funny when like a hillbilly goth.
Dude, gothabilly, rockabilly, hillbilly. What the fuck? What the fuck is gothabilly?
Gothabilly. Yeah, I'm all dark and mysterious and shit. You got death rock goth, glam goth, gothic fashion, trad goth, which I assume is like old school goth, pastel goth, emo goth. There's your crossover.
Wait, pastel goth?
Pastel.
That isn't like, how does
Easter
that
colors,
even
I
work?
guess.
It's like, yeah, I only wear pastel yellows, blues, and pinks, but I'm very goth. Like,
Well, there's another one.
Actually, yeah. Yeah.
is that actually what it is?
A goth that wears only bright colors, but also takes on a spooky motif, apparently. So I guess clowns are bubble goth. Like your Harley Quinn goths are bubble goth.
Huh.
Pastel goth doesn't look that bad. So you said
What do they
bubble
look
goth
like?
in general?
Disenfranchised frat boys?
No, it's like imagine emo hair, but it's like either that light blue or like light pink, and then there's still like a lot of black in there, but it's just
You
kind of
nailed it. That's exactly what it is. I just
highlights.
Oh, okay. I got it. I looked at it.
Yeah, it's not that bad.
It's not.
Bubble
Yeah,
goth looks retarded. This one looks totally retarded.
what is
Yeah, it
bubble
does.
goth?
It's just it's
Kind of
retarded.
the
I'm looking
same,
at this,
but-
and they should
It looks
stuck
like
to
a pastel goth that got into it because of Instagram.
Yep, exactly. They
I
saw
don't like
pastel
it.
goths with the filters on, and they tried to copy the filter look instead of.
Yeah, I don't.
Just
Pastel
being
goth's a lot more tolerable.
Absolutely. If I saw a pastel goth outside, I wouldn't really think anything bad about them. But bubble goth, that's retarded. Like, you're trying too hard. The makeup's wrong.
They should feel
The hair
bad.
color's off. Yeah.
Yeah,
they
you should feel bad about your choices and who you are as a human.
Yeah, awful. Absolutely awful.
A lot of gothabilly just seems to be like Johnny Cash with Johnny Depp's jewelry style.
Yeah, is it just goths with like hats?
Is it just Johnny Depp?
There's a lot of like black corsets for the ladies, but yeah, there's a lot of like Johnny Cash if he wore all of the same things that Johnny Depp wears when he goes outside.
So it's just Johnny Depp.
Yeah. Well,
but like with the duck butt hair though,
yep.
with the Johnny Cash hair.
We're looking at the same picture, I bet.
I bet you're right.
Gothabilly.
What are some of the other ones? I'm actually kind of curious to look another one up. Because these look
Let's
kind of
see.
cool. What's a trad goth?
Trad goth. Industrial goth. I bet that's a fun
Industrial
like
goth.
steampunk type of thing you got
Wait,
going on.
this trad golf just looks like Kiss.
Yeah, they look like regular goths.
Yeah, that's traditional goth.
Yeah,
It's not
so
trad
it's,
like trad
so-
wife. It's traditional like traditional.
so it's just Kiss.
Yeah,
kinda.
but with like sharper lines, I guess.
Oh,
Less
okay.
white makeup, maybe.
Oh, there's a lot of white makeup.
Oh,
on-
in
Oh, it sounds
industrial
like-
goth is like the garbage you see at music festivals.
It looks like cosplay almost. It doesn't look like real fashion that like an American could wear outside.
Yeah, it's a lot of like
Oh,
neon
yeah.
plastic tubing.
Yeah, like pastel goth, you could go to the Starbucks and be all right. This, you're kind of like a contraption. You got to have a hula hoop around you so no one runs into the weird thing sticking out.
Yeah,
Devil wings.
it's very like post-apocalyptic. Like no, it's not cyber. It's like steampunk.
Yep.
In some
absolutely.
ways, like post-apocalyptic. Yeah, steampunk. Ew.
If these looks go beyond the fact where like you couldn't get into like a Toyota RAV4 and then get out of it in the Target parking lot, then it's like it's past fashion. It's just dress up at that point, and I don't really think it should be included in this same group of fashion. So I understand if I was a vampire goth and someone called me an industrial goth, I would be extremely offended.
Take extreme offense to that.
See, I,
I
kinda
am not
assumed-
good, sir.
I
Like the
kind of assumed-
chiropractor can't stand with the dentist. Like you got to be separate groups. Don't stand next to me.
I don't
You're
need
not a
your
real doctor.
non-doctoral stink rubbing off on me.
No. Is there a doctor on board? Oh yeah, I'm a PhD. Shut up.
Man, I'm sure dentists hate doctors saying they're not real doctors. Can you imagine how mad they get when chiropractors are like, "So you're not like a doctor, though. You're a dentist, not like a doctor."
You know who's really awful? If you put like a mechanical engineer or industrial engineer next to like a software engineer, they will go on and on and on about, like, oh, you didn't take statics in college, so not a real engineer then, huh? Well, what exactly are you designing? You making the computer click faster? What's going on there? Like, they're so petty.
Computer engineers like, please don't make fun of me. I'm autistic. I will have just STEM if you guys continue.
He's like, well, I just designed the system that closes and opens the dam above 150 million people. I didn't do anything really special with my
like,
computer engineering.
It's just like, oh, well, that's like, you don't even know how to design the dam. What type of engineer are you? It's like, oh, you don't know how concrete works?
It's just insane levels of petty, man.
Oh,
I like it. All right, cool. Well, I think that's a good wrap up point. Thank you very much for listening to Against the Mall podcast. We appreciate you guys. I hope this new year is everything that you want. I hope you didn't set any sort of bullshit, unrealistic resolutions like new year, new me. I hope you didn't do that to yourself, because most likely you're not going to change. And that's okay, because you don't need to change. Like, we're all pieces of shit in our own way, and you don't have to try. You don't have to strive to be like a tech bro podcaster. Like, oh, you don't wake up at 4 a.m. You're not running while the rest of society's in bed. That's okay. You just be whoever you want. So hopefully you didn't set yourself up for failure, because, well, most of us, we're not going to make radical changes. But thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much, Flirt Chief, for joining us. We always appreciate you.
always.
We love you guys. Thank you for all of your patience, your loving, your understanding. I hope 2025 gives you your own personal manifest destiny. I hope you get your own Greenland this year. I hope that you can look back and say, yeah, goddamn right, I annexed that, and everybody's better for it. So I hope you find that. And if you don't, that's okay. Maybe 2026 is your year. Maybe you get like a Panama Canal as a or maybe you get a Gulf of America. I don't know. I'm not writing the script, but I hope you guys have a great year. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week.
I love it, dude. I'm going to shoot a CEO this year. I think that's the vibe.